And away we go here on Selection Sunday in college football, and boy, it should be a doozy. Harrison Graham and Tyler Jones here, college football now by Chat Sports. Well, Tyler, we got what we want, some drama for the committee in the final year of the 4-team playoff.
Who's in the multi-billion-dollar question?
Yep.
There are 4 spots, and we have several teams awaiting to see their fate if they are one of the 4 teams selected to make this college football playoff. Harry, Michigan, Washington, they're in. Everything else up for grabs.
Yeah, it should be very, very interesting. We're going to talk about different scenarios, have different discussions. You guys can get involved in the show. Should be a lot of fun. Now, the committee is supposed to release their rankings at 12 Eastern, 11 Central, but history repeats itself, especially on a drama-filled Sunday this year. Could be a little bit longer than that. You do wonder if those debates are still ongoing. But shout out your city. Let us know where you guys are watching from. A lot of people debating in the chat, Tyler, before we even started this show. Lots of debate going on already today.
Yeah, a lot of debate indeed, and the big question appears to be Florida State, Bama, or Texas for those final 2 spots. Checking in the chat, Ladarius says Roll Tide Roll. Keegan says Alabama over Florida State, Texas over Bama. Tony's just shouting out the Dallas Cowboys. Why not? Buck says Florida. Oren says Raleigh. Bulls Nation says Iowa. Got Michigan. We got Michael saying Central Florida. And Josh saying Hook'em Horns.
Yeah, we got Tony in Dallas, I think is what he's saying there. Daniel says Bama would be FSU 9 times out of 10. And that's kind of where I think a lot of this discussion from us is going to be leading up to the show. It's the old debate. Is it the 4 best or the 4 most deserving? We're going to get into all that here. But let's take a look at championship weekend first, Tyler, as we do have at least some more clarity, we think. Florida State's going to be the big debate. Their offense does not look like a playoff team. Their defense does, Tyler. They took care of Louisville 16-6 in the ACC championship game. We'll circle back to FSU. Michigan handled Iowa. That was never competitive, 26-0. They're one of the 2 teams for sure. And number 7, Texas dropped the hammer on Oklahoma State in the Big 12 championship game to finish 12-1. Pac-12, Washington handled Oregon for a second straight time. They joined Michigan as the 2 teams that are locks. And then Bama really threw a wrench into this whole thing, Tyler, by upsetting number 1 Georgia. And that's kind of where things sit. It's Bama, Texas, Florida State, it would appear. 3 teams for 2 spots. Some people will still argue Georgia. I don't think you and I are going to argue for them that much today.
No, and, that Georgia team, very good, but you talk about timing. Bad time to lose that game right before the selection. But, looking back at this week, how about Washington? 9-point underdog, one of the worst lines of all time.
Ridiculous.
To a team that already beats. And the way that they performed, I don't think it's indicative of how much they controlled that game, too.
They kind of gave up a fluky touchdown where Nix hits the crosser and the guy just kind of zigzags for a score. That felt more like a 10-point win. They really did control Oregon throughout a lot of that game. Now, I think an interesting debate that we're not talking about enough, of course, we're going to debate who the last 2 teams are. How about who should be number 1? Michigan or Washington? And I get it. The committee hasn't loved Washington as much throughout this process, but
they did move them up last week.
They moved them up last week. They beat the team that the committee seemed to like more than Washington for whatever reason for a second time, whereas Michigan played an Iowa team that's not that good, if we're being completely honest. So I think there should be a debate for who should be number 1, and it's potentially significant because if you're Washington, you're the top seed. You get to stay on the West Coast if you choose to play in the Rose Bowl.
Right, and you look at Washington, their resume is much better than Michigan's when you talk about quality wins. They did it in the best conference in the country, the Pac-12, RIP. There's a strong case to be made for Washington. What Michael Penix and that team did, he may have won the Heisman this past weekend, too. That's a whole other debate in itself.
Yeah, potentially. Jaden Daniels the favorite, but Penix right there. Lloyd says Michigan. Tony says Michigan. Someone says FSU should be number 1. I feel confident in saying that will not be the case today. Washington beat Oregon twice. That is true. Jason says Bama number 1. That's not going to happen either. Skills Effect, Michigan. Kulik says Michigan. Michigan has played 10 high school opponents. Keegan has played Washington. It's a good point. Think about the non-cons, too. Michigan played nobody. Washington beat Boise State, who ended up rallying to win the Mountain West.
Right.
They also beat Michigan State, who's bad, but at least they schedule a Power 5 team.
When they scheduled that game 10 years ago, they didn't know that Michigan State was going to be this
Michigan
bad.
didn't play a single Power 5 team non-conference.
No.
I think it's a real debate. We'll continue to have these discussions throughout the show. Go vote on the live poll, by the way. Who should be number one, Michigan or Washington? A lot of you guys favor Michigan. I think the numbers would suggest otherwise. We got some resume discussion coming up. But I do want to tell you guys about our sponsor first. That is Prize Picks. I'll tell you what, it was entertaining enough on championship weekend, but you could have made some money with Prize Picks if you haven't created an account already. I suggest you do so. PrizePicks.com/CLNS. Use our code CLNS to get a deposit match up to $100. The way it works is very simple. You've got all different sports available: NFL, college football, NBA, NHL, college basketball, etc. And you do 2 to 6 player entries. PrizePicks lays out stat projections, and you just take the more or less. And if all of your picks hit, you make money. For example, I got a little 3 player pick here entry for PrizePicks. Christian McCaffrey, he's going to rush for a touchdown. He gets one almost every single week. I like the more there. This is really easy money for you guys, by the way, in my opinion. A.J. Brown plus Chris Godwin, half a rushing or receiving touchdown. I think one of those guys scores this week. And then Bailey Zappi, give me the less on the passing yards. He came in relief of Mac Jones last week. Looked terrible. I think the Patriots are a mess. This is 10 to win 50. You can win up to 25 times your money if you do a 6-player entry with PrizePicks. Get started today. PrizePicks.com/CLNS. Our code CLNS is going to get you a deposit match up to $100. All right, Tyler, let's take a look at the current college football playoff map. And the locks are simple. Michigan and Washington are clearly in. They're unbeaten Power 5 champions without a situation like Florida State where they're going to have to play a second or third quarterback. So those 2 teams are in very clearly, correct?
Correct.
And then you get into the debate discussion. Florida State, and we're going to take a look at all the pros and cons of all these teams. Florida State, well, they're unbeaten as well. But without Jordan Travis, that offense has not looked the same. But to be fair, I felt like Tate Rodemaker was finding something in the second half of that Florida game. Then he gets concussed and doesn't play yesterday. So how do you evaluate that if you're the committee? Because he's going to be back, it sounds like. He's going to be available since there's a month in between these games.
Right. There's a lot of time for him to get ready. We've seen backup quarterbacks in the past, in the playoff, lead teams to championships.
Cardell Jones.
So there is precedent for this. And think about last night, too. That defense was incredible.
They have a championship defense.
They do.
They do.
In a perfect world, we get Texas's offense and Florida State's defense in the playoff.
Yeah.
But that's not the case. Florida State, it's very interesting. This is I am surprised that we got to this point of this much debate with an undefeated team.
Yeah, I mean, look, I woke up very conflicted with them because I went to bed last night thinking they're going to leave Florida State out. It sucks for them. Life isn't fair type of situation. But I woke up thinking, you want to talk about an all-time admission? Like if they are like, or whatever word you want to choose, like if you leave them out, like I guess the committee can just sit there and say, well, it's 12 teams next year. It's not going to matter in the future. But like that'd be quite the way to leave the 4-team playoff if an unbeaten Power 5 is left out. And you guys get your 4 teams in the playoff, and we'll continue the discussion with Texas and Alabama as well.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Which 4 teams should be in? Weigh in the chat. Tell us what you think of the final 4 that should be in the college football playoff as we are just under 50 minutes away from the rankings reveal. Rashad Lee says Bama and Texas should jump FSU. Skills Effect says Georgia's last 2 losses were both to Alabama. Very true.
That's true.
That the nation's longest win streak came to an end yesterday.
Egan says Bama and Texas should be the last 2 that join in. Aaron says Michigan, Washington, Florida State, and Texas, which would leave the SEC out, which, look, I couldn't really argue against that, right? Like, it feels weird, but I couldn't really argue against it. But, you know, there are the College Football Playoff Committee has in their bylaws when there's resumes that are deemed comparable, Tyler, they have different things they can look at, and one of the bullet points is key player availability. And Jordan Travis not being available feels like a big deal for Florida State's chances here because that offense does not look the same without him.
Yeah, we have a sample size, not a huge sample size, but nonetheless that shows a significant fall off. And before even Jordan Travis got hurt, the theme for Florida State was, wow, they're not impressing based on the way that they're playing, getting by these lowly ACC opponents, letting Boston College and some of these other teams hang around. Yeah. So they already had that going as is, even with Travis there. That's something to monitor. So we'll see how it plays out.
But on the flip side, too, and we'll get some shout-outs in a second, it's like I have to appreciate that they've won all these games. Like, it's just it's tough. Like Q-Dog says, Florida State earned their spot. Mikey, okay, I need 30 seconds of a soapbox.
Go ahead.
Mikey says Florida State is the new TCU, and they're referring to TCU losing by 50 last year in the national title game. Guys, they won a playoff game to get to the national title.
Right.
Had they lost by 50 in the semis, I would hear your argument. They beat Michigan, so if you're going to make that point, Michigan shouldn't have been in last year either. It's the dumbest argument I keep hearing, and people keep making it. So I had to get that out there just because I'm not going to listen to that debate any further. Scott says FSU is not the better team. That's the flip side of it. It's like, do I think they're one of the top four at this exact moment? No. Did they earn their way in there? Yes. So that's the decision the committee has to make.
And at some point, too, these games have to matter as well.
I know.
The Alabama-Texas game, losses have consequences.
Yeah, I agree. We've got, let's see, Scaper says Bama and Texas are the last two in. We've got M. Dutchy. Bama got blown out by Texas at home. It wasn't a blowout, but they definitely got beat pretty easily, I would say. ACC is in a top 5 conference. They're top 5. They're number 5, but they are top 5.
Yeah, if FSU gets left out, the committee is sending a message that the ACC is not a power conference.
And that's interesting, too. Like, if you're the ACC, do you implode if FSU's left out? Be interesting.
I think it escalates the process.
Yeah. Magic with the super chat. 2014 Ohio State lost QB and won Nittany, so FSU is in. It's a good point. Had that Ohio State team gotten in, Tyler, and got blown out, you wonder if the committee would use that in against Florida State.
Right.
But if I'm Florida State, I'm making the argument of, yeah, it didn't look great yesterday, but that's also the QB that's not going to play. Tate Rodemaker is, assuming he's clear concussion protocol, which I would assume would be the case. There's a month off here, and he was on the sidelines, I believe, last night. So that tells me he was close.
He was a game-time decision. Yeah. Ultimately, he couldn't give it a go. But the comparisons between this team and the 2014 Ohio State team, remember, we saw Cardale Jones play in the Big Ten Championship, beat Wisconsin 59-0 that year.
That sent a message.
So it was heard loud and clear that they were going to be fine at the quarterback position. We haven't seen that clear message delivered by Florida State just yet. Thanks for the super chat.
We do have a little super chat menu. $5. We'll talk about your favorite team. It can be a team in the college football playoff. It can be the Toledo Rockets. Doesn't matter. We will talk about your team. $10 super chat. Argue why your team should be in. We will put that on screen for you. Tyler and I will react to it. So there you go. If you want to donate to the program, appreciate all 625 people watching live. That's how you can do so. So we appreciate that. Okay, let's take a look at some resumes here, Tyler. 2 of these 4 teams have to go because Michigan and Washington are in. So you just look at the metrics. Bama's metrics says they're in. I mean, it's pretty simple. They've got the numbers. They've got everything in their favors. Top 5 strength of schedule. Top 3 strength of record. 4 top 25 wins there. No one else has more than 3 on screen. But Florida State, with metrics aside, they're undefeated. That's obviously going to be their argument. Texas, their argument is going to be we beat Alabama head-to-head, and their metrics are pretty close to Bama's here as well. I'm struggling for Georgia's argument, Tyler, other than I feel like Georgia's argument for people publicly is well, they've won the last 2 national championships. They have arguably the best players. To me, that that's not enough for me. Like,
no, it's a year-to-year sport.
I don't think Georgia's in the conversation, but for the sake of this show, we've got them in the mix. But I don't think they've got an avenue to get in. I really don't.
I think Georgia's out. Unfortunate timing for them that their first loss of the year happened to come
not
to
a
the SEC
conference champ,
championship.
and all 5 that are worthy.
Right.
So to me, they're number 6.
When I look at Florida State, what's so fascinating with that team, of all the things that we've talked about today, what more could they have done? Did they need to, let's say they get left out today. Did they need to blow out Louisville last night? Being undefeated in a Power 5 conference and beating 2, not 1, but 2 Power 5 opponents from the SEC in their non-conference. That to me is where, if I'm a Florida State fan, if you don't make it tonight, that's what I've asked myself. What more could we have done?
They blew out LSU, the likely Heisman winner, in Jaden Daniels. They beat their rival Florida with the backup quarterback. They went through the ACC unscathed. Like, I get it. Jordan Travis is out. It might lead to a not as entertaining matchup, but like, if it's just about entertainment, then go watch the WWE. Like, I'm serious. Like, at some point, the results have to mean something. Like, the more and more I think about this, like, yeah, for you and me, selfishly, I'd rather watch Bama play. I think they're a much better team than Florida State right now. But at some point, FSU, if you're sitting there and you're not in, I mean, you've got quite the argument. Muhammad Ali with a super chat. Texas fan here, trying to balance my bias that Texas beat Alabama with Alabama's strength of schedule being better. Did Bama have a better strength of schedule? They did, but not enough to outweigh the head-to-head. We just showed the four-team comparison. They both had top 15 SOSs, I believe.
And one thing we've heard from the committee as well that they've reiterated over the last couple of weeks, that head-to-head matters, and that head-to-head, it does not matter when the game was played, is what we've been told.
Yeah, let's get to that quote after this next super chat. We do have that quote from Boo Corrigan, the college football chair this year. Boo in the chat if you want. A couple super chats. Magic again. Washington has 5 ranked wins. Michigan has 2. So based on our projections, Washington actually has 4 because Utah dropped out last week, but Utah was ranked when they beat them, and USC was ranked when they beat them. So if you bring in the when you played them argument, they actually have 6. And they beat Boise State in their non-con, a Group of 5 champion. Like,
right.
Washington has a real debate to be number 1, and we'll take a look at those numbers here in a little bit. Bairden as well, Tyler, says Michigan 1, Washington 2, FSU 3, so they don't cry, 4 Texas. See, I think if Florida State's in, you leave them at 4. Like, to me, that's the compromise. Like, okay, you're in, but you're number 4.
And you go back to the very first playoff, Florida State, an undefeated conference champ.
Yep.
They were the 4 seed. Oregon, who was a 1-loss team, was above them that year. So there is precedent for that too.
Here's Boo Corrigan, and he said this last week. So in between last week's rankings and today, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday on a teleconference, he was asked, how does when you played matter when the head-to-head discussion comes into play? This is cut and dry to me, Tyler. He says, head-to-head is head-to-head no matter when the game is played. That's how we look at it. So if they flip Bama and Texas now, they're essentially saying, as we look at the committee's criteria when teams are deemed comparable, right? And I would say Bama and Texas have comparable resumes.
Sure.
No? To me, the head-to-head is precedent. Like, I know everybody's debating Bama and Texas. I think Texas is in. I think they're your number 3 team. I think the debate is Bama and Florida State. I really do. I think that's going to be the debate for the committee. Another thing the committee mentions is key player availability. So if they determine that between Bama and Florida State, the Jordan Travis absence is significant enough, then that is what they will point to. But to me, the Bama-Texas debate it shouldn't be one.
Well, as far as that Bama-Texas thing goes too, you know, there was a lull in the year where Texas wasn't playing their best football, where they were getting by teams like Kansas State,
they had a
Houston,
4 or 5 week stretch,
and a few others. But the way they finished against Texas Tech and then yesterday in the conference championship against Oklahoma State, Texas is back, no pun intended, to the football that we saw in September when they beat Alabama and dominated the way that they did there. I would argue, based on what we saw the last couple of weeks, that Texas is playing their best football. So for the folks out there that say, well, if they met on a neutral field now, Bama's the better team, I beg to differ. I think Texas is going to win the whole thing.
Yeah, I think it would be a great game. I think both teams would have a chance to win. Let us know who gets left out, and we'll get some shout-outs in a second. I want to make this point, too, because people keep saying, oh, well, Texas, they snuck by these teams. Do we forget that 8 days ago it took a miracle for Bama to beat Auburn?
Right.
I know it's a rivalry game on the road.
And do we forget that Quinn Ewers was out for a bit, too?
Yeah, exactly. A lot of those games that were close for Texas, Quinn Ewers was out. Bairden says Bama. Kins Talib says Bama. PS4 says Florida State. Let's see. Charlie says Bama. Stoops says Florida State. Steel City says Florida State. Telly says Bama. Dub C says Texas. Tony says Florida State. Kins Tabe says Florida State. Let's see. Ken says Florida State. Tony says Florida State. I'm seeing mostly Florida States, Tyler. A few Bamas, not many Texases, and I think that's valid. I think Texas will be the number 3 seeded team today.
Yes.
And I think
agree.
they should be, even if Florida State is in. I do think Texas should jump Florida State, and if FSU is in, I think they're number 4.
Yeah, one thing that's being talked about a lot, will the committee leave out an SEC team, an SEC champion for the very first time? Get some shout-outs here in just a second. With that in mind, as far as leaving out an SEC team goes, most years, the SEC is the best conference in college football. Not this year. It was Pac-12. So that's not the same conversation we can typically have.
And they're the only conference, as we are in year 10 of this, that has never been left out. So it's not like it would be a screw job if they got left out. Like, every other conference has had this happen to them. So, like, it's one of those weird years, man, where there's like 6 or 7 teams that you could make an argument that should be in the 4. And
2014, you had 2 one-loss Big 12 teams miss.
Yeah, it's tough, man. A couple more shout-outs. FSU out. Bama out from DeLune. Keegan says FSU is out. Jordan says Bama. Subscribe to the channel. We've got about 35, 40, maybe longer minutes until the committee unveils their top 4. We're going to react to that later today. Tyler will be back with another video breaking down the entire bowl game slate. Those bowl games will start to be announced throughout the next several hours, so be on the lookout for that. If you want college football coverage on close to a daily basis over the next month or so, we're going to have you covered here on this channel. We'll have playoff preview matchups. We'll have recruiting stuff, transfer portals heating up. We got it all. Myself, Tyler, Tom Downey, the rest of the staff. We're going to keep you guys in the loop with everything going on with the great sport of college football, especially this time of year. So be sure to subscribe. It's free. We got Magic again. He says FSU won the ACC with the third-string freshman QB. Respect. Look, I give them a lot of credit for navigating that game and winning it. It was ugly, but you know what pissed me off late in that game, Tyler? They get the ball back 13-6 with like 2.5 minutes left. And Jesse Palmer is on the telecast saying,
yes,
if I'm Mike Norvell, I'm trying to score a touchdown. I'm like, dude, like, you're just trying to manage this game with this freshman quarterback, man. Like, and that's kind of the flaw with this whole thing. Like, you're telling me if they get that touchdown and they win 20-6 instead of 16-6, that should determine if they're in the playoff or not? That is ludicrous to me. Like, if you're going to say they're not in without Jordan Travis, that's fine. But don't say it because, well, we needed a 2-minute drill touchdown to be convincing. Like, I didn't like that comment from Palmer at all.
I didn't like it either. When that moment was going on, I was starting to think back to that Miami game earlier in the year where they didn't run the clock out with kneel downs,
right,
and fumble the football. Like, your number one priority is still to win the football.
Win the game. Yes, exactly. It's so ridiculous. Muhammad here. Y'all are good at this. Why aren't you guys on the committee?
There's no media members on it.
Listen, Tyler and I will gladly take over starting next year. Boo and the boys can call it a career, and we're in. You in?
I'm down.
You in? Let's do it.
I would like to see multiple committees. This is too much power for 12 people to decide.
By the way, a live camera in the committee room as soon as the games ended last night through this morning would have been unbelievable. Just to hear those conversations. Dylan Heck, use common opponents for FSU and Bama versus LSU. Florida State beat LSU with a bigger point margin than Alabama did. I can't remember the exact score, but Bama beat LSU by 14, and I want to say Florida State beat them by 20. Either way, they were both convincing against LSU. Looking back at it, Florida State beat LSU 45-24, whereas Bama beat them 42-28. So that's advantage at Florida State as well. We've got another super chat from Magic, our guy here. He says, you guys think Liberty gets the New Year's Six Bowl? This is a underrated part of today's discussion. We're going to go through our rankings in just a moment, Magic. It sounds like, Tyler, it's either SMU or Liberty. SMU upsets, by the way, with a backup quarterback over Tulane. Can they sneak in and jump Liberty, who has the worst strength of schedule in all of college football? We'll see.
Yeah, great season for the Liberty Flames. They have the 13-0 campaign. I think they will get the nod. You had some politics involved last night of the commissioner of the AAC and the commissioner of the Conference USA sending out emails campaigning for that New Year's Six bid. But Liberty appears to be on their way. And, everybody assumed a few weeks ago Tulane was going to be that team. They've been the best Group of 5 team the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, I was pretty surprised the way they played against SMU. Okay, let's go through the 4 teams that most people are debating for the final 2 spots, Tyler. Here's the case for Texas. They won the Big 12. They've got 3 top 25 wins. They have the head-to-head win at Alabama by 10 points, 9 wins versus bowl-eligible teams, and their one loss was 34-30 on a neutral field to their arch rival Oklahoma, who's a top 12-ish team right now. That's kind of their resume and outlook, with obviously bullet point number 3 being critical.
Yes, and the Oklahoma loss came down at the very end.
Yep.
A game that was a toss-up game, could have gone either way. Texas, a very good team. You look at Alabama, SEC champs, 11 straight victories. Only loss was to Texas, and beat the number 1 team, Georgia, yesterday, 27-24. Alabama, that's a team, too, that is much better than they were
absolutely
at different points this season.
Yeah, they're clearly improved. They're clearly playing better than they did than when they played Texas. But who's to say Texas isn't playing better than they did when they met either, though, right?
Right.
I keep hearing about how Alabama is a better team than they were when they played Texas. So it's impossible for Texas to be better than they were in September.
Right. I think that you can say that Bama and Texas are playing much better than what they were early in the year, but you can't say that about Florida State, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. If you had to pick one, let's say the committee, Tyler, is going to honor Florida State and make them the number 3 team as an unbeaten champ. I think you have to beat Texas, man. They have the head-to-head. It was convincing. It was on the road by 10 points. I don't care that it was in September.
Yeah, it wasn't a neutral site game. It was in Tuscaloosa. They ended a long home winning streak for Alabama. Texas deserves that spot. It's got to be Texas if it's between these 2 teams. What do you guys think? We'll give some shout-outs here. Rocket Farm says Texas. Ken says Texas. Valerie says Texas. David says Bama. Dusty says Bama. Tim says Texas. William says Bama. Chris says Bama. Got Richard saying Texas. Bob Stoops in the chat says Texas. Didn't see that
Thanks,
coming.
Coach.
We got Brendan says Texas. George says Bama. Jay says Texas. Paul says Bama. Eric says Texas.
Austin, Bama. Christine, Bama. Ken's, Bama. Chat's heating up, baby. The debates are heating up. 30 minutes to go. Probably a little longer. The committee might dilly-dally. Tyler Jones going to tell you guys about Prize Picks right here.
Today's show is sponsored by our friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Here's how Prize Picks works. You choose 2 or more players on any given category, and it's real simple. More or less, whether you're talking fantasy points, passing touchdowns, receiving yards, all sorts of different categories to choose from, and you can mix and match between different sports, whether it's college football, the NFL, the NBA, and more. Here's what I'm rolling with on Prize Picks today. I got Jordan Love to have less than 219.5 passing yards against Kansas City. Jake Browning to have less than 218.5 passing yards against Jacksonville. And I got more than 20 fantasy points for Patrick Mahomes. If, let's say I put $20 down and all 3 of these hit, then we're turning that into $100 on Prize Picks. And Prize Picks is offering you a $100 deposit match on your first entry. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS. Use the promo code CLNS for that $100 deposit match. PrizePicks.com/CLNS. The link is in the comments and the description of today's video. Going in the live chat right now. Prize Picks, proud partner of college football, now here by Chat Sports.
We appreciate Prize Picks, Tyler. Let's take a look at Florida State now. They, of course, perfect 13-0 ACC champs. They've got the 3 top 25 wins, including that non-conference win versus LSU. Same amount of bowl-eligible wins as Alabama with 8. Texas had 9, so another kind of bullet point in Texas's resume there. It's just it's tough, man. You look at the last 2 games, by the way, without Jordan Travis, 20 points per game. They scored 24 against Florida, but I felt like they found something in that second half before he got injured because I believe they were down. Were they down 12-0 at halftime, or was it 12-7? Either way, they played much better in the second half in that game. And then obviously, look, they were just trying to find a way to win last night with their third-string quarterback. Brock Glenn probably had, before the week of practice this week, a handful of reps all season with the starters. I mean, they just needed to find a way to beat Louisville. So it's a complicated case for Florida State, Tyler.
Yeah, and you look at what their strength is. It's that defense. That defense is as good as any defense in college football. They looked awesome last night. Sure, they have their flaws at the quarterback position, but that's a team that we've seen get the big wins at points this year. The Florida win, the LSU win. At the end of the day, you got to find ways to win, and they've been able to do that.
I want to make one more point on Florida State, then we'll get to Georgia. Remember, guys, there's a month until these teams play again. They got 4 weeks to prepare. It's the most unique thing about this sport compared to others. You play every week, and then you have a month off. It's going to change next year. It'll be more like 2 weeks off before the first round. But who's to say that Tate Rodemaker, in a month of preparation, can't get a lot better and at least have that offense playing at an adequate level? It's like a fall camp. I mean, you've got a month to prepare with these guys. So I think that should be factored in when the committee has these discussions like, hey, it hasn't looked great the last couple of weeks, but they are undefeated, and now they have a month to try and figure out this thing out.
Not to mention, they would likely play Michigan as the 4 seed. Michigan hasn't fared too hot in the playoffs of late, too.
And I think Florida State's defense could keep them in a game with Michigan. We saw Iowa do that for a while, and their offense is putrid. And I think Florida State's offense is better than Iowa's, even with the backup quarterback. Case against Georgia, and because it's hard to make a case for them, Tyler, not a conference champion. All 5 Power 5 champions have 1 loss or less. That makes it tough for Georgia. Best non-con win versus Georgia Tech, and wasn't that convincing, if we're being completely honest.
A bad Georgia Tech team, too.
Only 6 wins versus bowl-eligible teams. That stood out to me when I went through their schedule. Best win was versus Ole Miss at home. And, yeah, their loss is not a bad one at all. 3 points to Alabama in the SEC title game. But to your point earlier, timing matters, and I don't think the wins are there for Georgia. Like, do I think they're probably one of the 4 best? Probably, but it's got to be a combination of that and what the results are. And with them losing yesterday, the results don't stack up to the other teams in the debate.
Yeah, well, and I mentioned the timing thing earlier. Think about this with Georgia. I'm not sure how many people remember this. They were supposed to play Oklahoma this year. That series got canceled by the SEC commissioner because they wouldn't be able to fill it with the timeline of Oklahoma.
If they had that win, I would feel probably pretty different.
Bama and their series with Texas got to continue because they got to finish it before Texas joined the league, so that game still went on this year. It could be a whole different situation if Georgia would have went into Norman and beat an Oklahoma team and had a win that Texas didn't have.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a really great point.
Is Georgia out? Y for yes, in for no. The consensus from us is that they are out. It is our live poll right now. 79% of you so far saying yes. What do you guys think? Drake says no. Gabriel says yes. Dutchie says yes. Tony says no. Oren says yes. Keith says yes. Richard says yes. If you love college football, hit the like button on today's video. If you don't hit the like button, then you are a fan of the BCS. That's the last thing we need right now. We don't need BCS or dollar signs. We need you to like the video.
The irony is if it was the BCS, there's no debate about the top 2.
Yes.
But I'm not saying I want that. I'm just saying that is the irony.
But one of the great things I think about this college football season is that we have a number of teams that we could say, are capable of winning the national title.
No, it's a good
which
point.
is where we'd be pissed if we were in a BCS scenario.
Yeah, I don't want the BCS. I don't want a two-team system, even if the top two are clearly bad. I'm just saying it is kind of ironic that if the BCS was in play and this playoff system never happened, there'd be no bitching about the top two.
173 likes right now. Let's get to 200.
Yeah, come on. We have 2,100 people watching live. Like the video. Hit that like button. We got 23 minutes and change until we're supposed to hear from the committee, but on this Selection Sunday, they tend to drag things out, and especially I could see that being the case this year. We're not going to the next thing until we cross 250 likes. So hit that like button, and let's let it go. If TCU got in last year, Georgia should as well. That's the beauty of the playoff, though. It's different every year.
Right.
Like last year, there weren't the volume of teams in the conversation.
It's a different committee every year, too.
This year, there are. It's different every year, man. It's
All
different every year. All right, Muhammad, with another 5. He says, if Tulane had gone undefeated this year, and this is 2024, do you see them ranking top 12? So, remind me, is Group of 5 promised a spot in the new system, or is that still in flux?
They are promised a spot in the new system. What was sent to the Board of Managers this week, actually, is a adjustment in the 2024 format where it's going to be the top 5 conference champions and 7 at-larges.
Who's the 5th conference champion? The Pac whatever?
Yeah, the Pac. Well, the Pac whatever doesn't qualify in the new format. They're not considered a conference.
Who's the 5th? Who's the 5th conference?
Let's see here. So we would have
SEC, Big 12, ACC, and Big 10. Who's the 5th?
Liberty.
So the 5th, it can be any conference?
It could be any conference.
Oh, so just the highest ranked conference champion from any of the other?
Yes. So Liberty would get the bid.
So the Pac could still get it. It's just not automatic.
No. You have to have an 8-team conference in.
But what if they morph it with the Mountain West?
That's not happening. That's already said.
Oh, it's off?
It's already
I thought
off.
it was back.
No. There is a scheduling agreement.
Oh. Well, that's even – just morph the conference and get that 5th spot.
Oregon State and Washington State would be eligible as at-large teams, not as conference champions. So Liberty would be getting that spot. They don't even have to be in the top 12 of the rankings, just within the top 25.
Interesting. Magic here says, don't matter who makes CFP, Pennick's going to win the Natty. I'll tell you what, man. Washington sent a message to the doubters. 9-point dogs is an unbeaten team. Ends up beating Oregon for a second time. They impressed me, man. And in a minute, we're going to compare Michigan and Washington because I think there's a real discussion there to be had.
Yeah. This team has been doubted all year. And something similar to, I think, Washington to Florida State is Washington found ways to win. It wasn't always pretty, but big games, push came to shove, this team found ways to get it done.
They had a lot of big games and won all of them. Like it's their resume is one of the better ones in the history of the college football playoff. It really is. Let's get to our mock rankings. We're not going to spend a ton of time on the bottom end of this. Most of these teams are slotted into similar spots. Liberty, SMU, Tyler, that's going to be the debate. Who gets the New Year's 6 spot from the group of 5? We're giving Liberty the edge. SMU's argument is they went 11-2, and their 2 losses were to Power 5 opponents. Liberty did not play a Power 5 opponent, so we'll see how the committee views that. Clemson, Tennessee, still in there as well. You guys debate Liberty, SMU. Type Lib for Liberty or SMU for SMU.
A lot of irony there with Liberty. Who do you got, Liberty or SMU? SMU, too. They held their own in those games against Power 5 teams.
Especially against Oklahoma.
They were within there for 3 quarters with Oklahoma on the road. But Oklahoma ended up pulling away late in that game. But SMU's not a bad football team. Liberty, this is their best season in school history here. Wasn't too long ago that they were an FCS program.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think that Liberty is going to get the edge, but SMU doesn't. I would say that they deserve some recognition for the job that they did, especially doing it with a backup quarterback in that conference title game yesterday.
No doubt about it. Wendy says Liberty, so does Taylor. Michael says SMU. Matt says SMU. Cody and Frost say SMU. Jordan says SMU. Lonnie says Liberty. Michi says SMU. Tony saying SMU. It's the live poll as well. Yes, Miami of Ohio on the poll. Where's Troy at, Sam? I saw the late push from Troy last night. Oh, man. I think it's going to be Liberty, but it'll be interesting. You continue with the mock rankings here. You got Oregon State, Oklahoma State. It's going to drop a spot or two. NC State, Notre Dame, those frauds, Iowa, they should be outside the top 25, but I think they'll still be in the top 20.
Everybody in that bar in Cedar Rapids got to drink for free last night.
Still drinking. I'm kidding. They cut it off after the game, I think. But free beer, if you guys missed that, a bar in Cedar Rapids said, "We will serve free beer until Iowa scores." Well, Tyler, they have still not scored. Top 15 we go. I don't think Louisville's going to drop that much. Maybe a spot. Arizona jumps them. LSU, Oklahoma, Ole Miss. Remember, a lot of these teams didn't play, so they're not just going to flip the order all of a sudden, I don't think. Penn State, 10. Mizzou, 9. We'll see where Oregon, Ohio State, how that all comes together. Maybe Oregon stays ahead of the Buckeyes. The committee seemed to really like them, so who knows. But they're obviously not going to be in the playoff, and neither is Ohio State. Now, this would be a fun bowl game. I don't even know if it's possible based on how the at-large system is going to play out this year. But we've seen them play before in the Rose Bowl. That would be fun. It can't be in the Rose Bowl because that's a playoff game. But Oregon, Ohio State, Tyler, they play tomorrow. Who do you think wins?
I think Oregon wins. You look at this Oregon team, and Bo Nix was fantastic this year. Their only 2 losses by slim margins to a Washington team. Ohio State's only lost to Michigan. Ohio State, I could never really get on board with that team with Kyle McCord leading the way at quarterback.
Yeah.
It never felt right with all that talent they had in their skill positions.
If they had C.J. Stroud this year, they'd be the best team in the country.
No question.
Because their defense is finally up to par, but it's just the quarterback wasn't there. Evan Wright says Ohio State. Steel City says Ohio State. Matthew says Oregon. So does Flex and Steve. Harrison, great name, says Ohio State. Tony, LJ saying Ohio State. Cam says Oregon greater than Alabama. It's not going to happen, Cam. Let's see. LJ says OSU by 17. Joshua says Ohio State. Tony saying Oregon. Getting to the top 6. Look, I saw Heather Dinich go on TV and say Florida State's going to be 6 and Georgia's going to be 5. That would be ridiculous to me. If they're out, I guess it doesn't matter. But to me, I know it's weird to drop from 1 to 6, but there's 5 Power 5 champions with a strong argument to play the playoff. I got Georgia at number 6.
Yeah, Georgia is out when this is all said and done. That would be the biggest shocker of all if Georgia somehow found a way again.
Yeah.
But, just unfortunate timing for them of when they lost in the SEC championship game. How about 5?
Yeah, this is where it, and again, we're mocking what we think the committee will do. I personally am very conflicted. I see both sides of it. I think the committee is going to leave Florida State out. I think you agree with me, Tyler, I think the debate is Florida State, Alabama. Bama we have at 4. We'll go ahead and put Texas at 3. We'll talk about the top 2 in a second. To me, Texas is in. They beat Bama head-to-head. That's done with for me.
Right.
So the question is, if you're this committee, do you have the balls to leave the SEC out? And do you believe with the month of preparation that Florida State can put out a competitive product to potentially at least have a chance to win in the semifinals? If you think the answer to that second question is no, then I think Bama's going to get the nod. If you think it's yes, then Florida State should get the nod. I don't think they're going to be convinced. I think they're going to give the nod to Bama for that final spot.
Well, and as we have examined this playoff committee for the last few weeks, it's been very evident that they have not, compared to previous committees, cared that much about resume, that they are very big on the eye test and finding the 4 best teams with how much they loved Oregon and Bo Nix completion percentage for however many weeks that was.
Well, and that does make me just wonder a bit about Georgia then.
Yeah.
Just a bit.
Yeah, and so for me, of trying to guess, read the lines between the lines of the selection committee, I think they would lean towards Bama over Florida State. Would it be the right move? Probably not. If we're talking about deserving and what Florida State could have, as we mentioned earlier, what more could they have done? I don't know. Who gets left out, Florida State, Texas, or Bama? I'm leaning towards it's going to be Bama, but I'm feeling really 50-50 on this.
Yeah, and look, something that's never happened before in this system is going to happen. Either an unbeaten Power 5 champ's getting left out or the SEC's getting left out. Neither has happened. One of those will happen today, barring some weird scenario where they put in Florida State and Georgia or something like that. But I don't think that's going to happen. C. Don says Florida State. No for Life says Bama. Joseph says Bama. Mateo says Bama gets left out. Matt Russo says Florida State. Tony says Florida State. Suleiman and Unbroken saying Florida State. SEC sucked this year, 4-10 against just the ACC. Is that correct? 4-10. I knew it was a losing record. I'd have to double check that.
I'm not sure about that.
Lila says Bama. Golden Time says Bama. Texas is in. Tyler and I are on the same page. Texas is in this playoff. Like, that would be a crime if Texas got left out. Like,
yes.
There's just no argument for it. They're in over Bama, which means they're in over Georgia. And if you want to keep Florida State ranked ahead of Texas, I'm fine with that. They're unbeaten. But if it comes down to Texas and Bama, to me, there's no discussion.
Yeah,
it's
we
Texas.
saw it. They settled that on the field.
Yeah, exactly. The bosses say we got to go to sub-only chat. So producer Chip is going to throw sub-only chat on. So spam sub in the chat if you are subscribed. And we're going
Chip, hate to break it to you, but Clemson not making the playoff.
Hey.
Maybe never again.
Dabo's washed, Chip.
What a fraud. Sub-only chat, spam sub now if you're subscribed to Chad Sports.
Get us some shout-outs, Tyler.
Let's see here. We got Andrew, Christine, Keegan, Steel City, Aaron, Big Dog, Austin, Got Hands, Jacob, Tony, Ruth, Big Dog, Bucks, Tony, Ralph, Little Stu, Keegan, DC, Ryan, Austin, Ruth, Mario, Steel City, Austin, Tony, Ryan, Mario, Kemper, Little Stew Pot, Tony, Dusty, Eric, Himjohn, Dusty. Good work. Thanks, everybody. For
Keep
getting in
spamming Sam and the Sam sub, same thing. Reason to subscribe is because college football coverage is heating up. We're just minutes away from the top 4 being revealed. We'll have instant reaction to that. Tyler's going to take you through the entire bowl slate later today, the New Year's Six, plus all the other bowls as well. We'll have playoff preview matchups coming up later this week, recruiting. We also have transfer portal updates. Lots of stuff to dive into here over the next several days and weeks. So hit that subscribe button and spam sub if you are subscribed. All right, Chip, take us to the player 2 comp. We want to break down Michigan and Washington because I know a lot of the focus, Tyler, is on who the last 2 teams are, but I do think there should be a discussion about who number 1 should be, and I think it's pretty interesting here when you actually look at it. I mean, the metrics and the results all favor Washington except for game control. And what game control is basically throughout the flow of games throughout your season, were you always in a position to win, where Washington had a few close calls, obviously, but they also more consistently played tough competition than Michigan. So, you look at this, Tyler, to me, there's a strong argument for the Huskies to get the number 1 overall seed, which could be critical because if they get the number 1 seed, they'll opt to play in the Rose Bowl instead of having to travel all the way to New Orleans for the Sugar Bowl.
Yeah, and one thing to mention, too, when you talk about the non-conference schedule and all that, Washington played 9 conference games compared to Michigan that played 8.
Yep.
And Washington still played a much tougher non-conference than Michigan did with playing Boise State and Michigan State in their non-conference. Washington, as far as the eye test goes, the thing that hurt them and what we saw why that they were an underdog, a 9-point underdog on Friday night, was that they did not dominate teams, but they found ways to win throughout the season. I think that's the ongoing theme. Sure, Michigan's got the game control, but at the end of the day, it comes down to winning football games. That's what Washington did.
Washington, more Power 5 wins. Washington, more top 25 wins. Washington beat a conference champion in their non-conference in Boise State. They played a Power 5 opponent in their non-conference in Michigan State and dominated them. Michigan did not play a Power 5 conference or a non-conference opponent. So, it's, I do think it would be an opportunity for this committee to send a message of, hey, they scheduled tougher, they had a tougher schedule, and they went blemishless in that schedule. I think I would put, if I was on that committee, I think I would put Washington number 1. I really do.
Yeah, it'd be very tempting to do so. What's the chat saying? Who should be number 1, Michigan or Washington? So far, the votes coming in, 64% of you say Michigan, and about 35% on Washington at the moment. Jason says Washington. Zion says go blue. Kyle says Michigan against everybody. William says Michigan. Joshua says Michigan. Oren says Michigan. As far as the Michigan against everybody thing, the committee has held firm this entire time. They do not care about the sign stealing.
Yeah, I mean, look, if they went undefeated, they were always going to be in. If they lost one game, they would have been out. So Michigan will be in the playoff. The question is, can they hold serve and move from 2-1 with Washington losing? We'll have to wait and see. Continue to subscribe. Let's get those numbers up. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. Can we get to 346,000 subs? We're less than 400 away and 3,600 of you are watching. We got 8.5 minutes to go. I'll tell you what. If we get there by the time that timer runs out, I know it's like 375 away or so, someone's going to grab me a beer and I will chug it. Can we get to 346,000 subs if we get there in the next 10 minutes?
5 o'clock somewhere.
I'll do so. Exactly. Okay, let's cycle through some of these conference title games, Tyler, as we await. We'll go in chronological order. This is kind of a great way to kick things off. Washington, Oregon, a pretty much win and you're in scenario. And the Huskies, like we've said throughout the show, Tyler, they just found a way again to get it done. And how about Dylan Johnson on the ground with a couple of touchdowns?
Somehow was not the MVP of that game, by the way. Made no sense. But Dylan Johnson was fantastic. The run game was good. Michael Penix made the necessary plays. The defense stepped up when they needed to. And Washington, they got off to that fast start in that game.
Yeah.
Oregon came back, but still found a way in that fourth quarter to make the big-time plays. Big-time win for Washington to get that done. Second win against Oregon this year.
Texas over Oklahoma State in the Big 12 championship. They blitzed them early with a 28-7 lead, never looked back. Quinn Ewers outside of one just mind-boggling interception in that first half, which is kind of good for like one of those throws a game. Other than that, though, he was terrific. 452 and 4 touchdowns. I think he threw for 348 in the first half. It was just clear from jump that the better team resided from Austin, Texas. I mean, I thought it could go this way, and it absolutely did.
Yeah, Texas looked fantastic. Quinn Ewers was great. Of note, too, we've talked about player availability a lot today with Florida State not having Jordan Travis. Xavier Worthy went down in this game, showed up in the second half there on crutches. He might be out for the playoff himself. He's arguably their best offensive player.
He's been nicked up all year. The month off helps. But, yeah, that'll be something to monitor moving forward if they get in, especially. Okay, this is the big one, SEC Championship. Alabama pulled off the upset. And to be honest, Tyler, after Georgia took a 7-0 lead early, Bama played better throughout. They kind of controlled them, if we're being for real. So that's why you and I project Georgia on the outside looking in here.
Yeah, Bama a couple weeks ago got by that Auburn team, got by UCF, but Milroe has really come along, and that's been the difference of why Bama was able to get through this season, get that win yesterday, is how much better he is compared to when he got benched early in the year. He made some big-time throws in that win yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, look, people are going to talk about that fourth down play that should have been reviewed, but nonetheless, Alabama found a way. No contest here, Michigan, Iowa. Iowa's got a great defense, but their offense is – did you see the stat that came out? They were dead last in the country in total offensive yards this year with like 3,100 for the whole season. Their punting yards was at 4,100. They punted for 1,000 more yards this season than they had offensively. That's embarrassing.
It's impressive that somehow this team won as many games as they did.
Ridiculous.
Without no offense of any kind.
R.I.P. to the Big Ten West.
Yes. Long live our sweet prince. But you look at the ACC title game, Florida State, that defense was awesome.
Yep.
Offense not so great, but that is a championship caliber defense. And, you know, part of this whole argument has been like, well, Florida State can't win if they play any of these playoff teams. You could say their defense has the ability to keep them within some of these games.
I think based on matchup, they could at least compete. I think they could hang with Michigan defensively potentially, but we'll have to wait and see. Tate Rodemaker, two words that are going to be discussed a lot in that committee room because, look, if it was Brock Glenn or bust, I don't think they'd have any argument to be in. But if they feel like Rodemaker's good enough, they could just sneak in. Who gets left out? Florida State, Texas, or Bama? Let us know in the chat. We'll get some shout-outs going here. We're potentially just a few minutes away from the College Football Playoff Committee from announcing their top 4. Keegan says Florida State. Dirt says Bama. Oren is advocating for Georgia, but that's not going to happen. Tio says Florida State. Ian says Florida State. Andy says Florida State as well. Let's talk about Prize Picks, our sponsor, just a little bit more here on today's show. I had a blast yesterday making some money with Prize Picks. It was such a fun college football Saturday. Made some NBA picks as well. Made some money there. PrizePicks.com/CLNS. Use our code CLNS to get a deposit match up to $100 when you sign up. It is the NFL today, so perfect time to download the app and get some NFL picks in there. We got Jordan Love, less than 219.5 passing yards. He's been very up and down this year. When he's been down, the volume hasn't been there. Jake Browning, tall task for him to fill in the shoes of Joe Burrow. I'm going to go the less there on his passing yards. And then more than 20 fantasy points for Patrick Mahomes. What's cool about Prize Picks, you can cross over sports. You can do anywhere from 2 to 6 player entries, different statistical categories, fantasy points, rushing yards. Sometimes there's like rush plus receiving touchdowns, more or less. All kinds of stuff available. Make your picks with Prize Picks. PrizePicks.com/CLNS. Use our code CLNS. It's a lot of fun, and you can make some money. Okay, a couple more super chats here. Down Maximum Sports Network says it'll be Michigan, Washington, Texas, and Bama. Join down and get your 4 team picks in the comments. That's how we have it projected. Obviously, Florida State would be very unhappy in that scenario.
By the way, the AP poll just came out within this hour. Has no effect on the
I know,
poll.
but it's still interesting to compare.
Michigan is 1, Washington 2, Texas 3, Florida State is 4 in the AP poll.
How close is it? Like, they have that point system. Is it out yet, the points? Okay, there's the AP top 5, though. On that front. It is within 29 points, by the way. So Florida State, the slight edge over Bama. Texas, the slight edge over Florida State. AP top 5, no weight, but just another measuring stick there. Cameron Edwards, appreciate the super sticker. Let's get to our projected top 6, the way we see it playing out as we are just minutes away. Remember, they're supposed to unveil it right at the top of the hour. They're going to dilly-dally. We know how that goes. But, Tyler, this is what we believe the committee would do. Not necessarily what we would do. I think Florida State has earned their way in. But we believe Texas and Bama claim the last 2 spots to join Michigan and Washington.
The ongoing theme throughout the rankings reveal the last few weeks of this committee is not resume, but finding the 4 best teams. And I think that they're going to look in the mirror. They're going to say to themselves, in a head-to-head matchup, Bama would beat Florida State.
Yeah, I tend to think that you're right. All right, if you're ready for the final college football playoff rankings for this year to be revealed in the final year of the 4-team playoff system, spam go in the chat. You got to get in there if you want your comments to be read. Spam go. We got Michael, Dante, Dallin, Digging, Game X, Dog in Suit says Bama's getting in. We got Ethan, Anna, Austin, Kimontrez, Dusty, Ethan, Tyler. We've got Yeet, Dusty Frost, Paleo, Seattle, Abdullah, LOL, Decory, Jose. We got Trevor, Lore, Mr. Platypus, Yeet, Roy, Kayla, Bryce. Keep spamming, go. Let's get the chat up and let's get those subs up, baby. We got 7,500 people watching live. We're going to hear from the playoff committee very soon. Can we get to 346,000 subscribers before the committee announces? If we do, I'm chugging a beer live on the show. Let's get to 346,000. We're 234 away. Daily college football coverage here on the channel. Appreciate everybody in there. Let's reset here. College football playoff rankings announced very shortly. He's Tyler Jones. I'm Harrison Graham. Welcome into Chat Sports. The final college football playoff rankings for the 4-team system are about to be revealed. We're going to react live with you. We're going to debate. You guys are debating in the chat. A lot of nervous fan bases out there, Tyler. Other than Michigan and Washington, they slept beautifully last night.
Yeah, who's in? The billion-dollar question. Will it be Texas, Bama, or Florida State for those final spots. We'll find out coming up in just a matter of moments. Which 4 teams should be in? The chat is flying with a lot of different reactions right now, Harry.
Yeah, and it's the age-old debate. We'll get some shout-outs here. Jack says Bama should get in. Let's see. Go Dogs from Matt. We've got, can we sneak in the Buckeyes? The Ohio State, enjoy the New Year's Six. You're not going to be in the playoff. Neither is Oregon. And quite frankly, I don't think Georgia is either. Seattle Kid says Texas should get in there. Mason says Florida State. Florida State undefeated. Put us in, KJ says. And all Florida State fans should have that argument, Tyler. It's never happened before where an unbeaten Power 5 champion has been left out of the college football playoff.
Yeah, we've also never had an SEC team left out of the college football playoff. So we will see history today one way or another. The championship games this past weekend, Florida State with a big win last night against Louisville, but was it convincing enough? Their defense looked great, offense not so much.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the question. Does the committee believe a healthy Tate Rodemaker can make Florida State competitive? I mean, that's what it comes down to. Brock Glenn, I think we saw last night, if he has to play, Tyler, they're not competing with any of these other teams in the playoff. Rodemaker, maybe they can because they have a championship-style defense. No Jordan Travis is definitely a big discussion point on the college football playoff committee this year. There's no doubt about it. Who do you guys think gets left out? And by the way, with this question, we have Georgia out. Our projections, we don't think Georgia's in. So you got 2 spots for 3 teams to join Michigan and Washington. Florida State, Texas, Bama. Which of those 3 gets left out? I believe the committee is going to screw Florida State. I think we're going to see the first Power 5 unbeaten get left out due to the quarterback situation.
Yeah, I think so too. This committee has not cared that much about resume. They've made it very adamant about finding the 4 best teams, and I think they're going to look at saying that Bama's a better team than Florida State. Some shout-outs in the chat. Who gets left out? Dusty says Florida State. Jennifer says Bama. Dante says Bama. Big Chewy says Bama. Lone Whittaker says Bama. Ray says Florida State out. Taylor says Georgia. Jeb says Florida State. And then we have Zach saying SEC out.
Couple super chats to fly through. We're still awaiting to hear from the College Football Playoff Committee. TJ X-Ray, FSU not top 5 without Jordan Travis. Georgia, Texas, Bama, Washington. So if Georgia, Texas, and Bama all get in, you're leaving Michigan out, TJ? Michigan's not getting left out, man. Michigan and Washington are locks. You can take that to the bank. And we've outlined it, Tyler. Georgia, they're just not going to get in, man.
Bad timing to lose to Alabama when they did yesterday. They don't have very good non-conference wins. They walked through an easy schedule, just not happening. Jeremiah with a $5 super chat, and he says horns down.
That's what you say. Even with your bias against Texas, you think they're in and should be in.
I've been high on Texas all year.
Yeah.
I predicted them to make the playoff before the season began, said they'd go 12-1, and that team is just so good. Quinn Ewers has been fantastic this year. I do wonder how they could potentially look if Xavier Worthy's not going to be able to give it a go.
Hopefully a month off, he has time to heal, but that is something to monitor. What we're monitoring is subscribers. Can we get to 346,000?
Oh, we're close.
I promised you that. Look at this. Look at ESPN screwing up graphics if you're watching at home. What a joke. Unbelievable. You guys don't
never
care about
happened.
that.
They never beat TCU.
Literally, it never happened. Help us get to 346,000 subscribers. College football coverage almost every single day. Oh, we're about to get there, Tyler. And if we do, before the rankings come out, I'm chugging a beer. Someone may have to go get me a Happy Dad. So there we go. Sub-only chat has been activated. So spam sub in the chat. We got to see this number hit 346K, though, first.
Here we go.
8 away.
Almost there.
8 away. Ah,
Bang.
yes. Shout out to all of you. Keep subscribing. We're going to have playoff previews. We're reacting live to the top 4. Help us out. Spam sub now if you are subscribed. And then we'll take a look at the college football playoff map as we await to see who gets in. Austin says sub. Dusty says sub. We got Jacob saying sub. Melvin saying sub as well. Eden, A-Dirt. We got Dante in there. Anthony saying, I just subscribe. We appreciate that. Robert Kerr with a $10 super chat. First time super chat. Appreciate that, Robert. Shout out to you. We got Zach Scott. He says the top 4 would mean leaving FSU out, but Bama out. So you're saying like Georgia joins Texas? Is that where you're going there, Zach Scott?
Don't see that happening, Zach. But
no, I don't
thanks for
either.
the super chat.
Johnny Garber with the 2. He says they learned that year if Florida State is in. I'm tired of the TCU 2.0. First time super chat, Johnny. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Johnny.
Here's the thing, though, Johnny. TCU won a playoff game last year. People just throw that out the window for some reason. Okay, so let's take a look at Dante. One more here. Character saying is this a super sticker? Appreciate that, Dante.
Thanks, Dante.
Let's look at the playoff map here because to me it's three teams for 2 spots, but we've got Georgia in there in the debate as well. The committee's not supposed to look at prior years. I think that's really the strongest thing Georgia leans on as well. We had won 29 in a row before yesterday. Their resume doesn't stack up to Texas, Bama, and even Florida State with the eye test not being there without Jordan Travis. I think they've got a stronger argument than Georgia. Yeah,
Georgia was supposed to play Oklahoma this year, but that got canceled with Oklahoma heading to the SEC next year, and so that kind of threw Georgia for a loop. In their schedule, they got some pretty easy opponents on their side of the SEC schedule. You look at those teams, and this is about Florida State, Texas, and Bama. We think Texas is the most likely in of those 4. It's really going to come down to Florida State and Alabama here.
Yeah, look, it's the Tate Rodemaker discussion. Do they think he's good enough to be competitive? I don't know. Brock Glenn definitely isn't, but if Rodemaker is going to play, which it sounds like he'll be available, then that's interesting. Can we get to 1,000 likes before the committee reveals their top 4? We're 300 away. Hit that like button. Let's go. Like the video. I got my Happy Dad ready here, ready to chug. I need to warm up just a touch. Otherwise, I'm going to get brain freeze, but that is coming here. Hit that like button. We got 850 likes, 12,000 people watching. We are awaiting, just like all of you, to hear from the College Football Playoff Committee, and when we do, we will bring that straight to you. Caleb with a 5. He says, "Hook 'em." I think you can breathe a sigh of relief, Caleb. I think you're in. You can blame me if you're not, but I think you're in. Reflex, I think at 1-loss Georgia should get in. It was lost by 3 to a good Bama teammate. Classic SEC.
SEC.
In there, SEC. I think most years you're right, Reflex. I don't think you're right this year. I think most years Georgia and Bama would both be in, but the way it fell across the country this year, Tyler, with more teams, it happens. That's the beauty of the playoff. It's different every year.
This was the first year in a while that the SEC wasn't the best conference in America. That belonged to the Pac-12. Russell says, Bama got this a 100.
We'll see. I'd be sweating if I was a Bama fan. Shane, Texas all day, baby. I think Texas is in, man. I think they're going to be number 3.
Yeah, I think they're capable of winning the whole thing, too. So that's a real threat right there. If you're ready for the rankings to be revealed, type go. Spam go in the chat. We'll do some shout-outs.
Tyler's going to get some shout-outs while I take down this beer, and it's cold, but I don't know if I'm going to have a better time to do it. So,
here we go. Spam go in the chat. Here we go.
By the way, we got 700 more likes from that light driver, twice as many as we had. So shout-out to the
Let's go. We got Jaden, D&B Sports, Donovan, Carson, Evan, Tiger, Trey,
it's so cold.
Peter, Old, Little Stewpot, Peter, Matthew, Shadow. We're in sub-only chat. Sub to be in the chat. David, Jaden, Brandon, Cecil, Carson, Jaden, FaZe, Braden, NFSS, Alan, Lewis, Dalton, Nick, Oren. Good job, everybody.
Shout out to all you. Shout out to the people. Hey, can we get to 350,000 subs? That'd be sick. We're at 346,400.
Our screen can't even keep up.
I know. It's unbelievable. College football content coming at you. We're going to live immediately when we hear from the playoff committee. Also, we are going to take a look at the entire bowl slate later today. We'll have college football playoff previews for the 2 semifinal games. We'll have recruiting updates, college football transfer portal. Lots of coverage to come, Tyler, in the next days and weeks.
It is going to be a busy few weeks ahead. We are your college football headquarters here at Chat Sports, and we were all over realignment. Now this is our big part of the year as well. Let's go for the case for Texas here. Big 12 champions, 3 top 25 wins, the head-to-head 10-point road win at Alabama with 9 wins against bowl-eligible teams and 1 loss was a close one at a neutral site against Oklahoma. You can't ignore. Head-to-head has to matter. We've been told it doesn't matter when the game played. You won by 10 on the road at Alabama. That's enough right there.
Yeah, there's a quote from Boo Corrigan, the committee chair, saying head-to-head factors in, doesn't matter when the game occurred. Now, are the debates in the last 24 hours discussing, well, that happened 3 months ago? I'm guessing someone mentioned it, but their policy is that it does not matter when that took place. So they've got the head-to-head. They've got more bowl-eligible wins. I think it's pretty clear that Texas would get the nod over Alabama, at least in my eyes. Now, there's a strong argument for Bama to also get in. They beat Georgia. They are the SEC champs. They have won 11 games in a row. 8 bowl-eligible wins. Texas had 9. And, again, they lost the head-to-head. So I don't think you can put them in over Texas, but that doesn't mean they don't have a strong case.
Right, certainly. And you could look at, too, that they are a much better team than what we saw early in the season. The Miller Road Company's come along. The case for Florida State, ACC champions, undefeated 13-0, 3 top 25 wins, 8 wins versus bowl-eligible teams, non-conference wins against LSU and Florida. Florida State lost their quarterback, Jordan Travis, but that defense is a championship caliber defense.
And I think Tate Rodemaker was finding something in the second half against Florida before he got that concussion. Brock Glenn clearly isn't ready, but Rodemaker was a game-time decision yesterday, so it's safe to assume he would be available a month from now for the college football playoffs. So it's interesting. Do they believe, Tyler, that Tate Rodemaker can make Florida State competitive in a semifinal game? Because it's a rare year where you've got up to 6 teams that feel worthy of the top 4.
Yeah, you look at this. 2 teams must go here. Bama's got the best resume of these teams on paper here. But you look at it, they all have a different case to be made in some way, shape, or form. Florida State being undefeated, Texas with the win over Bama, and then Georgia with all those wins in a row they had. Georgia is the obvious one that gets left out.
Yeah, their strongest argument is leaning on past success, and I don't think that carries enough weight to outweigh this year. And look, it sucks for Georgia. We'll look at the rest of their resume in a second. It's just not there, man. It's just not. Like, I get the 4 best, but it's got to be a combination of what you accomplished as well within the flow of a season.
They're the one team we're talking about here that didn't win their conference.
Exactly. Who gets left out? Florida State, Texas, or Bama? And by the way, we've got Georgia already out in this scenario. Let us know. Ryan King says, Bama, go vote on the poll. We got almost 1,000 votes. It's a tight race between Florida State and Bama. I'm glad we've got an audience that agrees with us. They all think Texas is in, too, for the most part.
We have a smart audience.
The debate is Florida State and Bama to me. That is the debate. It's about the quarterback position for Florida State. That's it. Like, Texas is going to be in because they beat Bama head-to-head. So it's going to be interesting. Let's see. Doug says Notre Dame. Yeah, they're going to be left out. Jason says Bama. Boozy says Texas is out. I disagree. Frosty says Florida State is out. Sean says Florida State is in. DS says Texas is out. Top G, Florida State is out. Man, it's going to be a challenge for this committee who we're still waiting from. You wonder if the debate has been hot and heavy this morning, Tyler. Just down the road from us, we're here in Dallas, Texas. They're out in Grapevine, a suburb of Dallas.
Yeah, enjoying themselves at the Gaylord Hotel, which I hear is great this time of year.
Yeah.
But, yeah, some tough decisions to be made. That committee, they watched all the games together this weekend, starting Friday night, and they had not been together prior to that. So very fascinating to see how those discussions go. Trying to get to 347,000 subscribers.
Let's go.
Can we get there before the rankings get revealed? If you want your team to make the playoffs, sub.
Let's go. Get those subs up. Roxy with the super chat. We do have a super chat menu that we can flash as well. Appreciate a first-time super chat from Roxy. Still waiting to hear from the College Football Playoff Committee, so stay with us. Coming up, you see up top left of your screen here. As soon as the rankings come out, we will reveal them to you. And just to reveal to our audience, we have a Texas fan here at Chat Sports. His name's Jeffrey Cooperstein. The man is sweating bullets. I mean,
I wish we had a camera on Coop.
Live Coop cam would be phenomenal.
He doesn't think they're getting in either.
They're getting in. He's just talking himself into that. They're getting in. Joshua with the 2, thumbs up. Like the video, like Josh. We're almost at 2,000 likes. Shout out to all of you. Here's our Super Chat menu. $5. We'll talk about your favorite team. Can be a playoff contender or not. And then $10, make the case. Send us your argument for why Georgia should be in, for why Florida State should be in. Hell, if you want to make the case for Ohio State, you can do that. We'll hear you out. $10, we'll put it on screen. That is what we are willing to do for you. Appreciate all of our donations. Appreciate everybody just hanging out. Like the video, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. We do appreciate it. Here are our mock college football playoff rankings, Tyler. You and I are in agreement. Georgia is on the outside looking in because the top 5 teams are all conference champions with compelling arguments. Georgia is not a conference champion.
Yeah, not a conference champion. The only team in the discussion that is not a great resume when it comes to non-conference wins. Bad timing losing to Bama when they did. 5, we have Florida State on the outside. This is what we think the committee will do.
These are not the real rankings. We're still waiting. Mock rankings. This is our projection. It's in the title on screen, but in case someone's listening in the car or whatever, these are our mock rankings. We think Florida State gets left out. I think they're going to say, without Jordan Travis, they're not a top 4 team, and I think they're more willing to leave out an unbeaten Power 5 champ than the SEC.
Yeah, I think that they're going to look at, okay, who would win a head-to-head matchup between Bama and Florida State? Nobody would be picking Florida State to win that football game, and that's their best case comparing the two.
And I don't know if I like that as a reason, but I think you're right. I think that's what they're going to do with Jordan Travis out. So Bama gets in. Texas gets the higher seed due to head-to-head here. And then I still think there's a debate for number 1, Tyler. I'm leaving Washington at 2 and Michigan at 1, but we've shown, and we can show again, that the 2 comp of Michigan and Washington, the resume heavily favors Washington. They played a tougher non-conference schedule, tougher schedule in general, more top 25 wins, more Power 5 wins. The only thing favoring Michigan is game control, and well, when you play a softer schedule, your game control is probably going to be higher.
Well, and there is a case to be made with Washington. I think the game control thing is that, hey, they didn't blow out teams. They narrowly got by teams like Arizona State, USC, and others. But I go back several years ago, the Cam Newton national championship team at Auburn escaped through teams all season long and won the national championship.
It's hard to go undefeated, man.
Got to find ways to win.
And that's what Florida State's going to point to, too. It's hard to go undefeated, man. Continue to subscribe. College football coverage all month long. We're less than 200 away from another milestone.
Keep going.
That'd be sick. Help us
Keep
out.
Keep spinning the wheel of subs.
Tyler and I appreciate it. Hunter with the super chat, $2. Appreciate it, Hunter. Shout out to you. We got Justin. He says TCU didn't win their conference last year and got in. Different year, man. Last year,
every year's different.
There weren't as many cooks in the kitchen, if you will. Like this year, if Texas was unbeaten going into yesterday and they lost, they would not be in.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's a different year, man.
And they had beat the team they lost to in their conference championship too.
Yeah.
TCU did.
True. It's a good point. Justin or James with the first time super chat. Michigan, Washington, Texas, Bama. That's what we project, James. Florida State would not be happy, and I wouldn't blame them because it would be the first time an unbeaten Power 5 champ got left out. Robert, appreciate the 10, Robert. Make the case for your team next time, Robert. MVP of the Super Chats today. Dak James with the first-timer. Let's go.
Thank you, Dak.
He says, Ohio State lost their top 2 QBs and won it all in 14. That's like, if I'm Florida State, that's my argument. I'm like, hey, it's happened before. Why can't it happen with us with a month of preparation, nonetheless, Tyler?
Yeah.
To get Tate Rodemaker ready.
Mike with a 5 says Bama should have lost to Auburn and barely beat Georgia. I mean, it was a Hail Mary that got him that win against a bad Auburn team.
Yeah, I hope the committee is discussing the game before for Bama. We can't just look at the Georgia game and be like, well, last week they weren't that good. So, yeah, it's a tough one. Another first-timer from Seth. He says, Gold Nose, fear the spear. Man, if Florida State gets left out, it's going to be an unhappy fan base, I'll tell you what. Enabled says, what do y'all think of the 18 playoff? Well, they're going to 12 next year, but
now they're first-time Super Chat.
This would be a great year for an expanded playoff, Tyler.
It would be. Could have happened if the Alliance wouldn't have stopped it. Douglas, my middle name, with a first-time Super Chat. Great name there, Douglas.
Says, how can you leave Bama out? SEC Championship took down number 1. Bama has done nothing but improve since week 2. Because it's a crowded playoff. You could leave them out. Maud, we're about to hear from the committee, we're being told. Talk about Michigan State.
I like Jonathan Smith.
Jonathan Smith, good coach. Maybe they get DJU in the portal. We'll see. But they got a long ways to go. Bend over, great name. FSU plays in the most mediocre conference in college football, while the SEC is far more competitive. Letting FSU in would be watching the 2015 Patriots play a high school. That's a bit extreme, Dan,
yeah.
But appreciate the 10. Christopher, imagine losing in the championship to an 18-year-old. Who are we talking about here?
Louisville
18?
Losing to Florida State last night.
Brock Glenn. Yeah, tough look for Louisville. Bama is out from Yo. They might be. It'd be the first year the SEC got left out. Hit that sub button. We're going to hear from the committee soon.
Let's get to 347,000 before the playoff rankings get revealed.
Type go.
Go.
If you're ready. I'm getting anxious, Tyler.
Here we go.
It's one of those years. Here we go. We're about to hear from the College Football Playoff Committee. We are about to hear. They're going to announce 1 and 2 first, it sounds like. Michigan does get the number 1 seed. The Wolverines get the nod over Washington. Michigan is number 1. Michigan is number 1. Now we await to hear 2 through 4, and obviously 5 and 6 to see who gets left out.
Michigan will get to choose between the Rose or Sugar.
And they will almost certainly choose the Rose Bowl. Continue to subscribe. We're less than 100 subscribers away from 347,000. Jim Harbaugh and the boys clapping it up in Ann Arbor. So,
Indianapolis.
they're in Indianapolis still from Big Ten Championship game last night.
Had a good night last night, I guess.
So we don't know yet, but pretty safe to assume Washington will be number 2 here, Tyler.
Yeah.
We'll wait to hear what the committee says. Keep subbing, keep liking the video. More college football content. It will be the Huskies. Washington at number 2. So no shocker there. I thought Washington had a compelling case for number 1, but I thought Michigan would be there, and that is the way it fell.
Yeah. Now is when it's about to start to get interesting.
Oh, man. Heart rate's up a little bit.
I don't have a dog in this fight, and
that's what I'm
nervous.
saying. I'm nervous. If you super chat, we'll get to these super chats after this all, so stick with us. And we're going to have an expanded reaction to the top 4, so don't go anywhere. Stick with us here. College Football Now by Chat Sports. Subscribe to the channel. More content to come. We're 60 away from 347,000 subscribers. Michigan number 1, Washington number 2. Both undefeated Power 5 champions. Florida State is also undefeated as a Power 5 champ, but obviously they've been in the middle of heated discussions the last 12 to 18 hours. Texas is number 3. Coop can breathe a sigh of relief. I told them they would be in, and they are. So
they'll play Washington.
So, Tyler, we nailed this. It's either Florida State or Bama for the final spot. One thing that has never happened before will happen. Either an unbeaten Power 5 champ will be left out for the first time, or the SEC will be excluded for the first time. You guys predict who is number 4, Florida State or Alabama? I don't think Georgia's in the conversation. Florida State or Alabama? Who is number 4? Predict in the chat. Here we go.
All right.
Give us some shout-outs, Tyler, while we await from the committee.
Tim says Florida State. Mark says Florida State. 20 subs away. Jaden says Bama. Mark says Florida State.
Yeah, they might reveal number 6 next. Little pause in the action here. Let's get to the next milestone here at Chat Sports. We're almost at 347,000.
15 away.
You see the matchups in the top left. Michigan will play whoever number 4 is. Washington and Texas is set, and I think that's going to be the Sugar Bowl, Tyler. I think Michigan will pick the Rose Bowl, but we'll see. They may not. If it's Bama, you got to think they're for sure picking the Rose Bowl.
Oh, definitely. You don't want to play Bama in New Orleans.
347,000 subscribers. Shout out to the real ones. Shout out to the real ones. Who will the Michigan Wolverines play in the college football playoff. And by the way, if it's Bama, it's a tough 1-4 matchup, man.
Oh my goodness!
Like I think if you're Washington, you're pretty happy.
I think Washington, Texas is going to be a phenomenal.
Yeah, it's
game.
going to be a great rematch of the Alamo Bowl from last year, by the way, which was a pretty good game as well. Georgia is number 6. I'm not going to lie. When the committee flashed that, I thought that was going to be number 4. Oh, my God. I skipped a couple heartbeats there. Georgia is officially out. They are number 6. So here we go. It's Florida State or Alabama. Who is the number 4 team? Let us know in the chat. Who's number 4? Oh, man. The heart rate is up. FSU or Bama? Alabama is the number 4 team. So for the first time in college football playoff history, an unbeaten Power 5 champion has been left out. Florida State at 13-0 is number 5. So the matchups are set. Michigan versus Alabama, I would assume, in the Rose Bowl. We'll wait official word. Washington and Texas in the other matchup. We'll get that graphic updated there. It is Bama number 4. Bama's number 4. We're having a graphical error, but they're the last team in. Did the committee get it right, Tyler?
Man, if you're looking at, and it's official, Michigan, Bama in the Rose, Washington, Texas in the Sugar. Just now with a 5 Eastern start time for the Rose, 8:45 Eastern start time for the Sugar.
Read only on list 4.
If you're looking for the 4 best teams, it's hard to argue that Bama's not one of the 4 best teams in America when you just knocked off the number 1 team in the country in Georgia in the SEC title game. I know Florida State is sitting there saying, what more could we have done? But it was obvious they weren't the same team without Jordan Travis.
Yeah, I feel bad for Florida State fans, man, because it's not their fault that their Heisman contender, Jordan Travis, got hurt. It's not their fault that they went undefeated and got left out. Let us know, did the committee get it right, yes or no? I can hear both sides of it, Tyler. For the better product on the field, I think the answer to this question is yes. Did they get the 4 most deserving teams, though? I would say no. What else was Florida State supposed to do?
They had 2 non-conference Power 5 wins. And here they are.
Bama had 0, by the way. They played Texas, which they deserve credit for playing that game, but they lost it.
We also could get a Bama-Texas rematch of the title game, too.
Yeah. Wow. What a time to be alive. It's not about deserving. Well, then, if that's the case, why is Georgia not in? Deserving has to play some level of a role. That sucks for Florida State, man. Steven says no. Dustin says yes. Oren says yes. Trindarius says no. Adam says yes. Jason says title of what? Josh says yes. Nathan says no. Esco says yes. Jason says yes. Crazy, man. Stick with us. We're going to have a deeper discussion reacting to the top 4 in just a moment here. SB says that's awful.
I bet Michigan's pissed right now.
Yeah, they got to play Alabama, man. They got to play Alabama. Here are the final rankings here. Michigan will play Alabama in the Rose Bowl. Washington will play Texas in the Sugar Bowl. I will say, I think we got 2 damn good matchups. So, I get the initial frustration if you're a Florida State fan. No doubt about it. I hear you. But I think when the games get here in a month, these could be 2 classics potentially.
Oh, definitely so. And Florida State, there's still the AP national title potentially out there. The AP had them 4, so that's not impossible. But, yes, Michigan and Alabama should be a fantastic game. Washington and Texas should be a fantastic game. Here's what I would give the committee credit for more than anything. Of these 4 teams, all 4 of them can win the national title. You couldn't have said that about Florida State. So if you were looking at the 4 best teams, you got those in this case. All 4 of these are capable of winning it all. The Rose Bowl, Michigan and Alabama, Bama at 12-1, Michigan at 13-0. This is the biggest test Michigan's faced all season long. Didn't play anybody in the non-conference. their best win against Ohio State. They played at home. Now you get to a neutral site here. Let's see what Michigan is really about.
Yeah, and look, this should be a great game. This is one of the tougher matchups from a number 1 overall seed we've seen in the history of the playoff. Alabama's playing really well. Jalen Milroe is probably the most improved player in college football. He's playing with a lot of confidence and swagger right now. We know historically, Tyler, when Nick Saban gets this much time to prepare for a big game, advantage Bama, and Michigan has not been able to slay that playoff dragon, man. 2 years ago, they got bulldozed by Georgia, and last year, they lost as a pretty heavy favorite to TCU. And what's the reward for being the number 1 team this year? Thank you, Allie. They play a red-hot Bama team with the best coach in the history of the sport. So we'll see.
Yeah, maybe Michigan had Connor Stallions at the SEC title game yesterday to help
Stallions will get them ready. Don't worry about that.
Washington and Texas in the Sugar Bowl. These two teams met in the Alamo Bowl last year. Michael Penix has been fantastic. He might be winning the Heisman later this week. Quinn Ewers on the other side for Texas. And also of note, with Xavier Worthy suffering that injury, will they have him in time for this game? Because they're going to need all hands on deck to beat a team like Washington.
Yeah, and look, if you're Texas and Washington, I think you're pretty happy with what you drew. Not that these are not two national title-worthy teams, but if I'm Texas, no way do I want to play Bama again in the first round. And if I'm Washington, yeah, getting the number 1 seed and playing in the Rose Bowl would have been sick, but I'd rather play Texas than Alabama, I think, if I'm Washington, at least right now. So it should be a great game, and let us know who you guys think is going to win it all this year. Tyler, do you have an initial gut feeling who wins it all this year?
Oh, man.
I think all 4 could win it. I really do.
I do, too. My gut feeling points me towards Texas.
Wow.
I'll be very curious. You know, I'll feel more confident about that if Xavier Worthy comes back or not. But the way Texas is playing, they really cranked things up a notch the last couple of weeks. Alabama, too, they're much different than when they faced Texas early in the year. The way Jalen Milroe's improved, I wouldn't want to be facing either. Those are the best 3-4 teams we've ever seen.
I'm going to scour Twitter, or maybe Sam can, to see if we have early odds on national championship favorite. If I had to guess, I would say Vegas has Bama as the favorites, just due to they typically do.
Probably Bama and Michigan pretty close.
Winner of that game will be a pretty big favorite in the national title game, I would think. All right, Sam. Producer Sam, our betting odds expert here, chiming in.
Bet hot right now. Ride Sam. That's the hashtag. Projected college football playoff semifinal point spreads. Michigan and Alabama, pick 'em.
Pick 'em.
Oh,
wow.
Texas -2 versus Washington.
See, when you look at, and look, I'm not a guy. Let's look at Vegas lines to determine the playoff. I'm not that guy. But I will say, Tyler, this projects to be 2 damn good games, which we saw last year too. TCU, Michigan, instant classic. Georgia, Ohio State, instant classic. So from the entertainment standpoint of this, these 4 teams are pretty evenly matched. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, no question. And with Sam mentioning Texas being favored against Washington, Vegas has not liked Washington all year, specifically in that Pac-12 title game. So they're going to carry that us against the world mentality again heading into that game.
And that's going to be probably 65-35 Texas split in New Orleans. I would think they're going to have a pretty substantial edge in the fan department. So that's going to be interesting. Ryan says Washington wins it. Let's see. Texas over FSU is crap. Texas was not in the discussion to be left out, Robert. I think them being number 3 makes that pretty clear. Let's see. The Tide should roll. Someone's asking about Ole Miss, Tennessee, and LSU. We'll hear about the New Year's Six. That's going to be coming up here in a couple of hours. We'll be back with the full bowl slate. If you're wondering at home, 1:30 Central, 2:30 Eastern is when the New Year's Six and the rest of the bowls start to be announced. So they're going to leak between now and then as well. Let's see. They got Texas wrong. I don't think they got Texas wrong.
No.
I think the top 3 was exactly fine. I think Washington could have been 1, but I'm fine with that.
And their one loss was not to a bad Oklahoma team on a neutral site.
Hey, guess what? So those projected point spreads, the guy was an idiot. From FanDuel, Texas -4.5, Michigan -2.5.
Okay. Still close, though.
So a couple points off on the spread
4.5
itself.
for Texas. Wow. Vegas really does hate Washington.
Yeah, they do.
What did Kalen DeBoer do to Vegas sportsbooks? Unreal. Let's sprint through some of these super chats. I know some of these probably came in before.
We'll just call them Fuzzy.
Flip wasn't out. Fuzzy. Oh, we skipped Fuzzy. Let's read Maxwell real quick. Georgia, Ohio, Auburn, Florida State. I'm not delusional. I think you're just trolling. Christ is King. Long. Okay.
Sunday somewhere.
Josh Ventola, Michigan, Texas, Bama, Washington. Well, Washington's number 2, but those are the 4 teams.
Thanks,
Kevin
Jeff.
Wade, appreciate it. Fuzzy, let's go Huskies. Yeah, Washington. They're gonna be playing with an edge as an underdog once again there, Tyler. Ricky says, "Go Huskies, go win the national championship." What do you think's the best story? Is Washington in the last year of the Pac-12 winning a natty? Is that the best story? If they go a perfect 15-0, kind of feels like
I think
it would
so.
be.
In a year where it was the best year for the Pac-12 in a long time as well, surviving and advancing every week. Washington's been phenomenal, and they now have the nation's longest winning streak.
I think that would be the best story. I think the second best would be Texas winning the Big 12 in their final year in the conference and winning the natty going into the SEC. We got Brooke Taylor. If Georgia is a quality enough to win to get Bama in, then Georgia is a quality enough team to be in too. Both are out of both are in. Unfortunately, Brooke, you were incorrect. Georgia is out. Robert says Florida State. Yep, they got left out, Robert. Dante, if I'm FSU, I'm pissed, but we don't want to blow out. That's the battle the committee's trying to do. They're trying to say, yeah, Florida State probably earned their way in, but if we don't think they're going to be competitive, we're not going to put them in. And I think they broke it down. I'll be curious to see what Boo Corrigan says.
Yeah, Boo has been consistent throughout the year of that they didn't necessarily care about resume, that they wanted the 4 best teams.
Eye test and head-to-head is what they have valued more than anything else in this process.
They love that Bo Nix completion percentage.
Never forget the Bo Nix completion percentage. What's the point of playing poor FSU? I hear that, man. It sucks. From an entertainment standpoint, I think they got better matchups, but if I'm a Florida State fan, Tyler, I am furious. You have no argument to be anything other than furious. I'm with you, man. It sucks.
Yeah.
It sucks.
With 2 non-conference Power 5 wins. Taft, FSU didn't deserve it with their play. They didn't look great.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think they earned their way in, but it's a unique year where there were a lot of worthy teams, and Jordan Travis's injury really just came at a brutal time, and they didn't look. I wonder if Rodemaker plays yesterday and they put up, say, 27 points instead of 16 if that gets them in. You know what I'm saying? But we only got to see him for 1 game, so it was a tough one. Kevin, just here back from the committee, Colorado is out. Colorado indeed is out, Kevin, and we'll see what Dion does from here. These are the 4 playoff teams: Michigan, Alabama in the Rose Bowl, Washington and Texas in the Sugar Bowl. We're going to react to this in further detail in a moment, but quick shout-outs on if the committee got it right. Then we're going to reset things. If you want to set a we're not going to do a cut. Well, I know. Why for yes and for no, but why don't we get the cut so someone can highlight cut it and then keep it going? You know what I'm saying?
Why for yes and for no?
Jim says no. Ellie says yes. Elias says no. Big Red says no. Ginger, yes. Elijah, no. Let's go. Bama. Jerry says yes. Big Red Rock says no. Tyree says no. Dillstar says yes. They beat them puppies. I don't know who
What's Boo saying here?
You're talking about Bama, I guess. Yeah. Boo Corrigan talking here. Let's see if he says anything notable. Boo,
Spam
boo
boo
in the chat. I'm going to try and...
If you're a Florida State fan, be spamming Boo for sure.
Yep. Trying to hear what Boo Corrigan says here. Hang on here. Ron says yes. Sammy says yes. Ricky says no. He's answering why they chose Alabama here. Naria says yes. William says yes. DC says no. Rusty says no. Boo's basically saying Florida State had an awesome season, but they didn't look the same they did through their first 11 games. That's essentially what he's saying.
They are a different team.
I think those are the 4 words that are going to stand out there. They're saying they are a different team. 5 words, whatever. A doesn't count. I think that's all we needed to hear because that was the debate. Florida State, Alabama.
are a different team.
They are a different team. So, spam boo in the chat. Quick super chat, and then we're going to react further to the college football playoff rankings. We'll get these two super chats real quick. Daniel says if Jordan didn't get injured, no doubt, go Gators. But I knew didn't leave out an SEC school. No way. Top conference plus viewership.
If Jordan Travis was healthy, there would be no discussion today.
They might be number 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Seriously, if Jordan Travis was in there.
Well, and they would have rolled Florida and Louisville, too,
For
those
sure.
last 2 games.
James, if FSU blew out Louisville, they could have had a better argument to get in. Yeah, I would have liked to see them with their backup and not their third string. I really would have, but he didn't clear concussion protocol, so I feel for Florida State, man. That sucks. That really, really sucks. All right, we're going to react further to the college football playoff being set. We've got our 2 matchups. We'll take a little bit of a dive into those games as well, and should be a lot of fun. So here we go. College football now continues here at Chat Sports. The college football playoff is set in the final year of the 4-team system. We're going to break it down here on Chat Sports. Harrison Graham and Tyler Jones with you. You see the matchups there. Michigan versus Alabama in the Rose Bowl. Washington versus Texas in the Sugar Bowl. We'll take a look at the matchups themselves in a little bit, Tyler. But I think we just got to dive into our instant reaction here of the 4 teams being set. The committee clearly, and Boo Corrigan, the chair, just said moments ago, they are a different team. Talking about Florida State without Jordan Travis, that injury seemed to really flip the switch to put Alabama in that final spot.
Yeah, the decision came down to who wins in a head-to-head matchup, Alabama or Florida State, and I think everybody and their mother would agree Alabama would win that matchup head-to-head. They are a better team than Florida State is right now. It sucks for Florida State. It's a team that did everything they were supposed to do. Had not 1 but 2 non-conference Power 5 wins, but this team had clearly fallen off from what they were a few weeks ago without Jordan Travis.
Yeah, a couple things to consider here. Number 1, Florida State had to go to their 3rd-string quarterback in the ACC championship, and Brock Glenn was not ready. They won in spite of him with a championship-level defense. I do think that's worth mentioning. You do wonder if Tate Rodemaker, Florida State's backup, who started to play better in the second half against Florida, if he plays yesterday and they put up 27, 30 points, would that have been enough? Would that have been convincing enough to put them in over Bama, who just beat Georgia in the SEC championship? We'll never know because it didn't happen. I feel for Florida State. I want to get that out there. An unbeaten Power 5 champion has never been left out of the college football playoff. And sure, you could say, well, this will never happen again. We're going to a 12-team system. That doesn't make it feel right, though, right now. It just doesn't. I get both sides of the argument. I think right now the 4 teams that made it are going to give you the best and most entertaining product on the field. But at the same time, to your point, what was Florida State supposed to do? I mean, Jesse Palmer on the telecast last night is telling Mike Norvell
to run up the score
late to try and seem more convincing. He's just trying to manage a game with the 3rd-string quarterback in the moment. It's hard to do that, man. So you let us know. Did the committee get it right? Type Y for yes and for no. I think for the best games possible they did, Tyler, but I can't say there isn't an argument to be pissed if you're Florida State fans because there absolutely is.
Did they get the 4 best teams? Yes. Did they get the 4 most deserving? No. That's what this comes down to. The committee, I'll say to their credit, has been consistent the entire time in the last few months of we are looking for the best, not resume based. What do you guys think? Why for yes and for no?
And obviously it's always a combination of both, and I think the injury to Jordan Travis pretty clearly swayed the pendulum against Florida State. So let's take a look at these matchups a little bit here, Tyler. You got the Rose Bowl, which Michigan opted to take that game, which makes sense. You don't want to play Alabama down in New Orleans. So they're going to play in Pasadena, 5 o'clock Eastern. Rose Bowl wants to keep that afternoon time slot, which is when it's always been on New Year's Day. Wolverines undefeated, trying to slay that college football playoff dragon. They've lost to Georgia a couple years ago. They got upset by TCU last year. Well, now they get a red-hot Alabama team. That doesn't make it that much easier as Jalen Milroe is playing pretty good football for Nick Saban right now.
This is an incredibly tough draw for a 1 seed to have to be facing this Bama team. Milroe is playing so much better than what he did at the start of this season. And Michigan, they were able to weather the storm without Jim Harbaugh, and their defense looked fantastic down the stretch here. This is going to be a fantastic game.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch it. I think the early line is like Michigan minus 2.5 or something like that. It's tight. Over-under set at 46 for anyone keeping track at home. Sportsbooks are definitely raking in the bets right now. We'll take a look at Washington and Texas in a moment. That, of course, is a rematch from the Alamo Bowl game a year ago. But before we get there, let's talk about Prize Picks, today's sponsor. There's going to be a lot of Prize Picks, more or less type of projections you can get into with these college football playoff games and all these bowl games over the next month or so. Get started today, prizepicks.com/CLNS, our code CLNS. Get you a deposit match up to $100. It's daily fantasy made easy. They have stat projections, and you take the more or less on player entries from 2 to 6 players. If you do a 6-player entry, you can win up to 25 times your money if you hit on all 6 picks. If you do a 2-player entry, it's less bang for your buck, but easier to connect, obviously. Little NFL Sunday entry for you guys. Christian McCaffrey, half a rushing touchdown. I think he finds the end zone today. Give me more there. A.J. Brown, who's been red hot. Chris Godwin, good receiver. Only need 1 total touchdown, rushing or receiving out of those 2. I think that hits. Give me more. I'm going to go less on Bailey Zappi passing yards. The Patriots are a mess offensively. $10 to win 50, so 5 times your money there. Again, you can win up to 25 times your money. Get started with Prize Picks today, prizepicks.com/CLNS. Use our code CLNS to get a deposit match up to $100. Let's take a look at the Sugar Bowl, Tyler. It's a rematch of the Alamo Bowl, like I mentioned. Texas and Washington, 2 high-flying offenses, but some pretty good defenses, too. I think both these teams are pretty complete.
Yeah, and I think the common theme with both these teams is they have found ways to win this year. Texas went through a lull where they got by teams like Kansas State. They were without Quinn Ewers for a while. Washington, on the other end, got by teams like Arizona State and USC and others. But here they are, finding a way to get to this championship game. 2 very good quarterbacks. I think this one's going to be a fantastic matchup here. Washington, watch out for their run game. That run game looked fantastic against Oregon.
They're balanced.
Texas did a great job of slowing down Ollie Gordon in the Big 12 championship. Will Washington be able to have an effective run game like they had in the Pac-12 title game?
Yeah, and the good news is if the run does get stuffed, if you're a Washington fan, you've got an NFL quarterback and 3 NFL receivers with Jalen Polk, obviously Rome Odunze. They've got Washington as well. Or Washington also has, I'm completely blanking on that third receiver, Jalen McMillan, the other one as well. They got 3 big-time receivers. Texas, Xavier Worthy was on crutches in the second half of the Big 12 title game. We'll keep an eye on that. They got 4 weeks to get ready, both preparation-wise and health-wise. That would be a notable loss if he was unavailable, but he's been nicked up all year. I have a feeling he's going to be available. They've got A.D. Mitchell on the outside, and even though Jonathan Brooks went out with injury, Tyler, they've got a good crew of running backs back there. Blue's been running the ball well. They've got C.J. Baxter as well. Keelan Robinson's a good change of pace back. So both these offenses can really go, both in the run and the pass game, and they're not unreal defenses, but they're both more than adequate on that side of the football.
Yeah, and then the Xavier Worthy element. Is he going to be able to play or not? How does that change things for Texas in this matchup? That'll be something to monitor. The big storyline, obviously, is Florida State getting left out of this whole ordeal with an undefeated record, the first ever Power 5 team to go undefeated and miss the playoff. Did they get screwed? Type 1 for yes, type 2 for no. Harry, what say you?
I think they did get screwed, but I understand why they got screwed, if that makes sense. Like, look, if I'm a Florida State alum, I don't care what any of these talking heads, you wouldn't care what I would have to say, and I wouldn't blame you. Like, I think the matchups are better with Florida State out of it, but that doesn't mean they didn't get screwed. They absolutely got screwed. They're an unbeaten Power 5 champ. They beat LSU and Florida in the non-con. They got screwed because their quarterback got hip tackled and snapped his leg. That's why they're not in the playoffs. So It sucks for Florida State, man. It really does. I think the matchups are better without them, but they still got screwed. So I'm typing my one for yes. If you want more college football, NFL, and NBA coverage all year, we cover all three sports very, very closely. And if you're a college football fan, the next month or so, this is the time to be subscribed to Chat Sports. Help us out. Hit that sub button. It's 100% free. Recruiting information and updates. We got transfer portal updates. We'll have deeper dives into these playoff matchups as we move forward as well. We'll take a deep dive into Washington, Texas, and into Michigan, Alabama, so be on the lookout for that. Sub for more content. We would greatly appreciate it. Some final thoughts here, Tyler. So, again, and we nailed this on our live show. We thought Texas was going to be in and be number 3, and that was the case. The decision the committee had to go through was, are we going to leave out an unbeaten Power 5 champ for the first time ever, or are we going to leave out the SEC for the first time ever? Something that has never happened before was going to happen. They opted to keep the SEC in with Alabama and to exclude a Power 5 unbeaten champ in Florida State.
Yeah, that's the bed that they made, and they're going to have to sleep in it with that decision here. And you look at that Alabama team, and your one blemish is to a team that is in the playoff in that Texas team. And I'll say this. Florida State has every right to be pissed. No question about it. But it's not like that you got left out for an undeserving team in Alabama. This team, Alabama, looks like a complete football team on both sides of the football that just beat the number 1 team in the country, ended the nation's longest winning streak that was owned by Georgia here. Like, that's a worthy team. I mean, Alabama deserved to be there too. It's not like Georgia, who lost their conference championship game, got in over Florida State. Right. That would have been criminal if that happened. That didn't happen. This is the ultimate life isn't fair moment. Yes. It really is. I mean, the committee had 5 very worthy teams. All 5. This is the first year all 5 Power 5 champions had a very strong argument. In the 10-year history of the 14 playoff, first year it's ever happened. Usually there's like a 2-loss team or whatever. We have a 4-team tournament, and you're telling me the Power 5 system didn't necessarily work for 4 teams? Shocking. Yeah, imagine that. Well, it's tough nature, tough business, but at the end of the day, I think the committee made the right call. I hate it for Florida State, but Alabama is the better team. The number 1 job of the committee is to get the 4 best teams. Yeah, and look, that's always subjective. We know that, but I tend to agree with you. These games are going to be better without Florida State, but that doesn't make it any less painful if you're a Florida State fan. It really doesn't. But I guess the silver lining is this is why you expand. You know, coming into this year, a lot of people didn't like the expansion idea. Well, we just had a year where it's so clearly if expansion was in play, it would be better think for everyone. Think about this as far as that expansion idea goes. In next year's situation, Florida State at 5 would then have to play a first-round game at home. And I think we could live with that. We could say, okay, sure, you didn't earn the first-round bye. Prove it to us you're worthy of being here. Yeah. And I could live with that. Georgia would be in. Ohio State that lost 1 game by 6 points would be in. So let us know who you guys think wins the college football playoff this year. Michigan, Alabama in the Rose Bowl, Washington, Texas in the Sugar Bowl. Should be fun. Let us know who you guys think wins it all. Get some shout-outs here. 12 teams next year is right. Tim says Bama wins. Ty Frazier says Bama. Alabama from L.A. Michigan from Derek. It feels like the winner of Bama-Michigan will be favored in the title, but at the same time, the winner of that game is probably going to be more beat up than the winner of the other game. And you don't have a month to prepare for the second game. Yep. It's like a 10-day turnaround. Yep. Between games there. So, yeah, that'll be something to follow. This is a huge legacy game for Jim Harbaugh, by the way. Oh, yeah, hasn't won a playoff game Hasn't won a playoff game. There's a lot of NFL buzz that he's just going to bail after this year regardless. Like, you're going up against the greatest coach in the history of the sport, Nick Saban. This is a legacy game for Jim Harbaugh. As great of a coach as he is, he never won a Super Bowl in the NFL, got to one, hasn't won a playoff game. Like, this is his moment. With everything going on this year, this is it. Well, then, look at his quarterback, J.J. McCarthy. There's been a lot of question marks about J.J. if he can make the necessary plays. He's won the games that mattered throughout the regular season. He's made the plays when it matters most, but I will say this. In a shootout situation, can he make enough plays? We saw against TCU in a shootout situation last year,
He could not. He threw 2 back-breaking interceptions.
And he hasn't faced a defense like this Bama team.
If this game gets back and forth with how Milroe is playing, call me crazy, I might give Milroe the edge there in a shootout with how he's been playing recently.
Yeah, I might too.
We know Michigan wants to play clock control, run the football, get to 3rd and short, limit the possessions. If that game gets into a track meet, I think I would give Alabama the edge.
I think I would too. The Washington-Texas game there, I got to say, Quinn Ewers, that's a guy that's played well in some of these bigger games. Like, you could say
Bama last year, he played awesome. Bama this year, he played awesome.
Other than that one pick yesterday, he was flawless.
Yeah. He didn't play very well against Oklahoma, threw a couple picks, but in every other big game in his 2 years at Texas, he has not been the reason they've lost games.
No.
So it's going to be very interesting. Super chat coming in from the Average Pandas. First time super chat, appreciate it. Says, take to account that Alabama beat the #1 team compared to Florida State, who beat Louisville with the 3rd-string quarterback. Oh, I think we've taken everything into account.
Oh, we've gone over all that.
Yeah, I mean, look, it came down to a very simple discussion. Can Florida State with the backup quarterback be competitive? The committee clearly said they don't think they can.
Statement coming in from Florida State Athletic Director Mike Alford. The committee failed college football today, calls the decision to leave Florida State unforgivable.
I'd do the same thing if I was running that university. Like, look.
This might be the nail in the coffin for them in the ACC.
It's a good point. That could be I know you're going to 12 teams, so it's not necessarily going to impact future playoffs, but in some ways it would have. They would not have gotten a first-round bye despite being undefeated.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, if you're the ACC today, bad day for the conference.
Bad day.
You don't have a team in the playoff despite having an unbeaten team, and now it's already about half the conference has flirted with leaving. Those talks are going to re-pick back up, I think.
Oh, yeah, because that was actually one of the things that Florida State was thought to have to their advantage compared to being in the SEC was an easier path to the playoff.
Yep.
Being in the ACC, now that's not there. That's not the case.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Bama loses their key non-con game. Florida State wins theirs and goes unbeaten. Still gets left out for Bama.
Right.
It's interesting. Derek Meary says Michigan will smoke Bama. JJ's the next great Tom Brady. Michigan 45-31.
I know we've seen some blowouts in these semifinals over the years.
Last year, they were both great games.
I would be surprised if either one of these games was a blowout.
Yeah, I think both games are good. And quite frankly, people in the past have suggested blowouts have been a result of picking the wrong teams. I think it's more so because of this month off. Like, when you take a month off, one team typically comes out flat. I think that's what's happened. But I think all 4 of these teams are complete enough that I'm with you. I'd be surprised. If there's a blowout, which game is it?
I think probably Washington, Texas.
Just one team's red hot and the other one turns it over, and it just becomes a track meet for the winning team.
We've seen both teams come out hot in games, even just this past weekend. It could be a situation where one of those teams starts out hot and doesn't look back.
Yeah, I could see that. Dwayne with the 20. Shout out Dwayne Jackson. He says, I think Florida State being left out was the right call. It's unfortunate Jordan Travis is out, but with the 3rd-string QB, I don't want to see another semifinal blowout. I do want to be clear. Tate Rodemaker was expected to be available, their backup. He was a game-time decision last night, so it wouldn't have been their 3rd string in the playoff.
Right.
It would have been their backup, but I do wonder if the committee was sitting in there and they were like, well, I wish we could have seen the backup tonight, because clearly with Brock Glenn, that was I don't know if you're a top 20 team with him, but with Tate Rodemaker, we don't know. And I think the committee sat there and said, well, we don't know. We do know what Alabama is and just did. We're going to give them the edge. I think that's what they did. And that's why they're the number 4 team, and Florida State is on the outside looking in as you look at these final rankings. And I feel for Florida State, man. I really do. We've never seen this happen before, but I'm also not going to go nuclear on the committee either, because I don't think they had it easy. Not that they deserve any of our sympathy over some of the things they've done over the years, but tough call, man.
Here's one question I'll throw out there for you, Harry, as we're winding down here on our college football rankings reaction. How much of the SEC propaganda machine had to do with this? I mean, you had on game day yesterday, Greg Sankey making the case for the SEC before the games were played. We know about ESPN and their partnership with the SEC. I mean, to me, I think that the ACC and Florida State didn't have much of a voice compared to the SEC and how loud that was.
It's a shame Jordan Travis got hurt, because if he's healthy and they go 13-0, they're obviously in. It would have been very interesting to see the debate actually be Texas and Bama. I think the committee was able to shield themselves from that debate because of Florida State's QB injury.
Yeah.
Now, to me, it's pretty clear Texas should have gotten in. And they have them ranked over Bama, so you could sit there and say, oh, well, they would have put Texas in over Bama because they did it here. Did they, though? Because, we'll never know that behind closed doors because, yeah, they ranked Texas higher, but
they took unprecedented steps there.
If they're both in, it's not like committee's going to feel heat about, well, why is Bama not 3 and Texas 4?
Right.
Bama fans don't care. They're just happy to be in. But if Florida State was unbeaten with Jordan Travis and that debate became Texas and Bama, the SEC, we would have really found out how much power they have.
Well, and speaking of the propaganda machine of the SEC, take example of this. Booger McFarland on the ESPN show a few moments ago said that this is a travesty to the sport. One team has a loss, that's Bama. One doesn't, Florida State. Booger, I didn't hear that from you before. I didn't hear that before today from Boog.
I will say, during halftime one of the games last night, he advocated for Florida State to get in.
Okay.
So at least this week he has made that. I don't know if he said that all year, but yeah, I mean, look, the bottom line is people did not expect Bama to beat Georgia, and they did. And that made this whole thing very, very complicated. There's no doubt about it. Like the video if you love college football. The debates going forward will be interesting, too, in the 12-team playoff. I think people think that stuff's going to go away. There's still going to be debates. Who should get the buys? Who should be the group of 5 team? Should there be a group of 5 team? It's going to be fascinating, Tyler, to see how this sport evolves in a new 12-team system.
Yeah. If we took the rankings as is, today's debate would have been about Oklahoma, if they're the last team in or not. The group of 5 discussion would have been fascinating after Tulane's loss all of a sudden. Does Liberty get in?
By the way, I've been a strong advocate of the group of 5 in the playoff, and I still think I am. I will say, though, this year would have been, whoever got in would have gotten absolutely destroyed. Could you imagine Liberty? Well, I guess if it was Florida State, maybe not, depending on their QB situation. But, could you imagine, Georgia Liberty in the playoff?
Oh, it'd been awful.
So, I wonder if they need to make an addendum. Okay, highest-ranked group of 5 team is in, but there's got to be some kind of, you have to be undefeated and have a Power 5 win or something like that. I don't know how they're going to do that moving forward. Dylan Heck with the Super Chat says, they didn't want a Ohio State 2014 storyline. Tough break for them. SEC buys for sure. I mean, look, the 4-team system, Tyler, ends with the SEC never getting left out of the playoff. So I hear that argument. Remember, Alabama got in one year without even playing in their conference title game.
Right.
I know that was true for Ohio State last year too, but
the thing about this too, Dylan, what was different this year compared to other years, the SEC wasn't the best conference in the country.
Yeah.
And yet they still got the, as Tim Brando calls it, the pure playoff privilege treatment. That to me is what was fascinating. In the past, you would say, well, they're the best conference in the country. They had to have a team in the playoff. They clearly weren't.
Yeah. They had 2 really good teams. Even LSU, as great as year Jaden Daniels had, they had one of the worst defenses in the country. LSU was not special. Ole Miss was not a special team. The Pac-12 was a better league this year. There's no doubt about it. Derek with the Super, they wanted 2 SEC schools versus 2 Big Ten schools, not 3 Big Ten schools versus 1 SEC school. FSU to the Big Ten. I mean, if I'm Florida State, I'm definitely considering my options moving forward.
It's a $150 million buyout right now to get out of the ACC. But we saw Texas and Oklahoma were supposed to spend $80 to get out, and they got out for $50
well,
apiece.
they also didn't have the Longhorn Network money to just kind of help that out too.
There's been rumblings
Like
that
Seminole TV isn't
there's
bailing
been
out.
rumblings that Florida State's actually been talking to the Saudis.
Really?
Yes.
Independent and just have just to back them
to get like a loan to buy them out.
That
Yes.
would you want to talk about an all-time storyline? Do those discussions continue after this?
I think they heat up a bit. Live Florida.
Mike Norvell, the face of the Saudis in college football.
Starts showing up to live golf events.
My goodness. Shout out your favorite team. We're kind of winding down here, but we still have a lot of people watching. Let us know who you're repping here, whether it's a playoff team or not. JD says, roll tide, roll. Can't wait for those elephant tears when Michigan crushes Bama. Georgia is 6th. They're obviously not top 4 dog fans. Roll tide. Yeah, look, timing's everything, and Georgia lost at the wrong time, and they didn't win their conference in a year where all 5 conference champions had a strong argument to be in the playoff. In most years, both Bama and Georgia would have gotten in. Like last year, that would have been the case. Not this year, though.
How about Sark facing his former team in Washington?
Yeah, there's good storylines all over this, man. Like, no one knows what Jim Harbaugh's future is. He's missed half the season to suspensions. He's got to face Nick Saban, the greatest coach in the history of the sport. People like me kind of thought Nick Saban not was cooked, but like his best days were past him, which if he doesn't win a national title again, then that's still true. But for him to rally the troops after that Week 2 loss to Texas, that's a hell of a coaching job. Sark to actually get Texas back to the level they want to be at, that's a hell of a job. Kalen DeBoer, I think, should be Coach of the Year, Tyler. 13-0, navigates the toughest conference in the sport. And how many games have they won in a row now? It's like 20?
Yeah, it's something crazy.
I mean, they went 11-2 last year, so these games have great storylines, man. They really, really do. Let's see. Sorry, Texas from Christopher. So are you a Washington fan? You a Washington fan? Let's see. Michigan will be 0-4. Well, they're only 0-2 in the playoffs. This would be 0-3 if they lost. Steal Alabama's signs. Get Stallions back on the payroll, Michigan.
Update from Brett McMurphy. The Orange Bowl will be Florida State, Georgia.
Man, they're going to get
So that's like the 5th place game.
Yeah. Winner gets 5th. Man. It's a shame it's not Jordan Travis, but if it was, they'd be in the playoff anyway. Florida State, Georgia in the Orange Bowl.
I like Georgia big.
Yeah. Tate Rodemaker, that's going to be. You wonder, though, I mean, Carson Beck's going to go back to school next year, I think. Like, how many Georgia opt-outs are there for any of their draft guys? I don't know how many high first-round picks they have this year, but you wonder how motivated they'll be to play in a game to play in a non-playoff game. Got a super chat from James. We'll get to that here in a second here. And then, do we have a loop situation set up? We'll send this to Loop in just a second. Dwayne Jackson, shout out to you. He says, how fast will Florida State will do anything and everything to make the jump to the SEC and employed to the ACC? Yeah, like we were just talking about that. Like if you're Florida State, I don't think you should be blaming the ACC today, but
it didn't help.
At the same time, you still have to be thinking, well, if the SEC can still get in a year where a strong argument to leave them out is there, then why would we stay in this conference? You know? Crazy.
I mean, if it was the same situation, if they had beat Georgia yesterday as opposed to Louisville in these circumstances, they're in and there's no debate.
Yeah. Yeah. Tough. James W., comparing Florida State to Ohio State is dumb. Ohio State won their conference championship. Well, you got to remember.
Ohio State lost a game that year.
Yeah, I was going to say,
at home.
Ohio State lost at home that year to 6-6 Virginia Tech. Florida State went unbeaten. They beat their 2 Power 5 teams in the non-con. Ohio State lost to their non-con Power 5 opponent. So you're right, it is dumb. Florida State has a stronger argument.
Yes.
Like, I think everybody looked at that Big Ten title game and was like, oh, my God, this is clearly a top 4 team. And, yeah, they won it all, and they were playing like a top 4 team, but they ignored the full season that year. I'm sorry, they just did. Like, and that's just how that went. The Average Panda says, I think that Florida State fans will be humbled when they play Georgia in that matchup. Sure, but like them losing to Georgia doesn't mean they didn't have an argument to be in the top 4. You know what I'm saying? Like,
And, I mean, just human nature. You're not going to be excited about playing in that game.
yeah, Florida
You're
State.
not going to play your best naturally. It is going to take a heck of a coaching job out of Mike Norvell to rally the troops for that
And
game.
let's be honest, if you're Norvell, your focus over the next month is probably more so on finding out if Rodemaker's good enough to be your quarterback next year than it is to just try and beat Georgia. You're not in the playoff
Your
anymore.
focus over the next month is transfer portal and recruiting.
Yeah, you're trying to get better for next year and find out if Rodemaker's the guy or not. So, yeah, Mr. C73 with the super chat. Off the subject, appreciate the 10. Would y'all like to see down by contact add to the college football rules? Would have helped Tulane yesterday. I don't know why college football doesn't mirror the NFL with some of the rules. Like, I like being your own sport. Like, keep the wide hashes. That's unique about college football. But I think the feet in bounds and the down by contact should be the same at both levels. Your goal as college football should be, hey, we are the best product leading to the NFL. Why not mirror a lot of the same rules?
That one is actually one that I actually like in the sport because guys are not as physically built as NFL players, and you're going to have more injuries by forcing down by contact.
Okay.
Guys that aren't suited. I mean, not everybody in college football is suited to play in the NFL.
What about feet in bounds?
Feet and pounds? I could be either way. The
I
one
don't
I really want to change badly that I've been clamoring for years is defensive pass interference needs to be a spot foul, not a 15-yard penalty. It gets ridiculous, especially at the end of football
you
games.
just tackle guys.
Yeah, like, okay, you tell me like that I can just get away with that. They might throw a 15-yard penalty. Like, it's impossible to throw a Hail Mary unless you're Alabama at the end of a game and win.
If you're Florida State, by the way, you should absolutely be pissed at Auburn for completely collapsing in the Iron Bowl last week.
Couple more bowl updates for you of some games that we have right now. We mentioned, in case you're just joining us, Michigan, Bama in the Rose Bowl, Washington, Texas in the Sugar Bowl.
Both
Those
playoff
are
games.
Playoff games. One New Year's Six Bowl we know of. Florida State, Georgia in the Orange Bowl on December 30th in Miami. We have the Hawaii Bowl, San Jose
yes.
State in Coastal Carolina.
I think that leaked last week, by the way, but it's official now.
Right, a New Orleans Bowl, Louisiana and Jacksonville State.
Hey, Jacksonville State. There you go. Average Panda says he shouldn't have to rally the team. They should be fired up due to not getting in the playoffs.
I mean,
Sure, but like,
technically they still have a shot at the AP title.
it's not going to happen. Especially if Michigan or Washington wins the national title. But I guess if like a one-loss team wins it, maybe. Yeah, I don't think Mike Norvell in the meeting this afternoon is saying, guys,
We're going for the AP title. Split national title, baby.
Where's the Harris poll? Goodness. All right, we're going to send this thing on loop unless any last-minute super chats come in here. Here are your matchups, and here is how it went down. Michigan earns the number 1 seed by going perfect and winning the Big Ten. Washington going perfect wins the Pac-12. They're the 2 seed. They'll play Texas, the 3 seed, who won the Big 12. Then Michigan will face Alabama, the 1-loss SEC champs. Florida State, the team got snubbed. Georgia's on the outside looking in as well. And that is how things sit. Michigan, Alabama in the Rose Bowl. Washington, Texas in the Sugar Bowl. And, of course, the national championship game down in Houston about 10 days after, I think January 11th, I believe, 10th or 11th, whatever the Monday is after New Year's, which would be, actually, I think the 10th, would be the 10th. So there you have it. Tyler, any final thoughts before we sign off here? And by the way, Tyler will be back later this afternoon with the full bowl slate, so stay tuned for that.
Yeah, it's a tough call, but it's the right decision by the committee. You got the 4 best teams. And when they were showing the reactions, Michigan was not thrilled about having to face Alabama. That should tell you all you need to know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love both these matchups, by the way.
I do, too.
I think they're going to be – I've said it 10 times. I'll say it again. I feel horrible for Florida State. They got screwed. They did. But I understand the screw. Like, when TCU and Baylor got jumped for Ohio State – I didn't understand that one. I understand this one. Like, I do understand this one. Dylan, appreciate that. We try our best here. We're going to send this on loop, our deep reaction to the college football playoff with a little sneak peek at the 2 semifinal games, so stay tuned for that. He's Tyler. Shout out to Sam Brown for producing this thing. We're going to send this on loop, so feel free to hang out for a little while. College football now continues here. The college football playoff is set in the final year of the 4-team system. We're going to break it down here on Chat Sports. Harrison Graham and Tyler Jones with you. You see the matchups there. Michigan versus Alabama in the Rose Bowl. Washington versus Texas in the Sugar Bowl. We'll take a look at the matchups themselves in a little bit, Tyler. But I think we just got to dive into our instant reaction here of the 4 teams being set. The committee clearly, and Boo Corrigan, the chair, just said moments ago, they are a different team. Talking about Florida State without Jordan Travis, that injury seemed to really flip the switch to put Alabama in that final spot.
Yeah, the decision came down to
Tyler,
who wins in a head-to-head matchup, Alabama or Florida State, and I think everybody and their mother would agree Alabama would win that matchup head-to-head. They are a better team than Florida State is right now. It sucks for Florida State. It's a team that did everything they were supposed to do. Had not 1 but 2 non-conference Power 5 wins, but this team had clearly fallen off from what they were a few weeks ago without Jordan Travis.
Yeah, a couple things to consider here. Number one, Florida State had to go to their 3rd-string quarterback in the ACC championship, and Brock Glenn was not ready. They won in spite of him with a championship-level defense. I do think that's worth mentioning. You do wonder if Tate Rodemaker, Florida State's backup, who started to play better in the second half against Florida, if he plays yesterday and they put up 27, 30 points, would that have been enough? Would that have been convincing enough to put them in over Bama, who just beat Georgia in the SEC championship? We'll never know because it didn't happen. I feel for Florida State. I want to get that out there. An unbeaten Power 5 champion has never been left out of the college football playoff. And sure, you could say, well, this will never happen again. We're going to a 12-team system. That doesn't make it feel right, though, right now. It just doesn't. I get both sides of the argument. I think right now the 4 teams that made it are going to give you the best and most entertaining product on the field. But at the same time, to your point, what was Florida State supposed to do? I mean, Jesse Palmer on the telecast last night is telling Mike Norvell
to run up the score
late to try and seem more convincing. He's just trying to manage a game with the 3rd-string quarterback in the moment. It's hard to do that, man. So you let us know. Did the committee get it right? Type Y for yes and for no. I think for the best games possible they did, Tyler, but I can't say there isn't an argument to be pissed if you're Florida State fans, because there absolutely is.
Did they get the 4 best teams? Yes. Did they get the 4 most deserving?
No.
No. That's what this comes down to. The committee, I'll say to their credit, has been consistent the entire time the last few months of we are looking for the best, not resume based. What do you guys think? Why for yes and for no?
And obviously it's always a combination of both, and I think the injury to Jordan Travis pretty clearly swayed the pendulum against Florida State. So let's take a look at these matchups a little bit here, Tyler. You got the Rose Bowl, which Michigan opted to take that game, which makes sense. You don't want to play Alabama down in New Orleans. So they're going to play in Pasadena, 5 o'clock Eastern. Rose Bowl wants to keep that afternoon time slot, which is when it's always been on New Year's Day. Wolverines undefeated, trying to slay that college football playoff dragon. They've lost to Georgia a couple years ago. They got upset by TCU last year. Well, now they get a red-hot Alabama team. That doesn't make it that much easier, as Jalen Milroe is playing pretty good football for Nick Saban right now.
This is an incredibly tough draw for a 1 seed to have to be facing this Bama team. Milroe is playing so much better than what he did at the start of this season. And Michigan, they were able to weather the storm without Jim Harbaugh, and their defense looked fantastic down the stretch here. This is going to be a fantastic game.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch it. I think the early line is like Michigan minus 2.5 or something like that. It's tight. Over-under set at 46 for anyone keeping track at home. Sportsbooks are definitely raking in the bets right now. We'll take a look at Washington and Texas in a moment. That, of course, is a rematch from the Alamo Bowl game a year ago. But before we get there, let's talk about Prize Picks, today's sponsor. There's going to be a lot of Prize Picks more or less type of projections you can get into with these college football playoff games and all these bowl games over the next month or so. Get started today, prizepicks.com/CLNS, our code CLNS. Get you a deposit match up to $100. It's daily fantasy made easy. They have stat projections, and you take the more or less on player entries from 2 to 6 players. If you do a 6-player entry, you can win up to 25 times your money if you hit on all 6 picks. If you do a 2-player entry, it's less bang for your buck, but easier.
Is to a team that is in the playoff in that Texas team. And I'll say this. Florida State has every right to be pissed. No question about it. But it's not like that you got left out for an undeserving team in Alabama. This team, Alabama, looks like a complete football team on both sides of the football that just beat the number 1 team in the country, ended the nation's longest winning streak that was owned by Georgia here. Like, that's a worthy team. I mean, Alabama deserved to be there too.
It's not like Georgia, who lost their conference championship game, got in over Florida State.
Right.
That would have been criminal if that happened. That didn't happen. This is the ultimate life isn't fair moment.
Yes.
It really is. I mean, the committee had 5 very worthy teams. All 5. This is the first year all 5 Power 5 champions had a very strong argument. In the 10-year history of the 14 playoff, first year it's ever happened. Usually there's like a 2-loss team or whatever.
We have a 4-team tournament, and you're telling me the Power 5 system didn't necessarily work for 4 teams?
Shocking.
Yeah, imagine that. It's tough nature, tough business, but at the end of the day, I think the committee made the right call. I hate it for Florida State, but Alabama is the better team. The number 1 job of the committee is to get the 4 best teams.
Yeah, and look, that's always subjective. We know that, but I tend to agree with you. These games are going to be better without Florida State, but that doesn't make it any less painful if you're a Florida State fan. It really doesn't. But I guess the silver lining is this is why you expand. You know, coming into this year, a lot of people didn't like the expansion idea. Well, we just had a year where it's so clearly if expansion was in play, it would be better
think
for
about
everyone.
this. Think about this as far as that expansion idea goes. In next year's situation, Florida State at 5 would then have to play a first-round game at home. And I think we could live with that. We could say, okay, sure, you didn't earn the first-round bye.
Prove it to us you're worthy of being here. Yeah.
And I could live with that.
Georgia would be in. Ohio State, that lost 1 game by 6 points, would be in. So let us know who you guys think wins the college football playoff this year. Michigan, Alabama in the Rose Bowl, Washington, Texas in the Sugar Bowl. Should be fun. Let us know who you guys think wins it all. The college football playoff is set in the final year of the 4-team system. We're going to break it down here on Chat Sports. Harrison Graham and Tyler Jones with you. You see the matchups there. Michigan versus Alabama in the Rose Bowl. Washington versus Texas in the Sugar Bowl. We'll take a look at the matchups themselves in a little bit, Tyler. But I think we just got to dive into our instant reaction here of the 4 teams being set. The committee clearly, and Boo Corrigan, the chair, just said moments ago, they are a different team. Talking about Florida State without Jordan Travis, that injury seemed to really flip the switch to put Alabama in that final spot.
Yeah, the decision came down to who wins in a head-to-head matchup, Alabama or Florida State, and I think everybody and their mother would agree Alabama would win that matchup head-to-head. They are a better team than Florida State is right now. It sucks for Florida State. It's a team that did everything they were supposed to do. Had not 1 but 2 non-conference Power 5 wins, but this team had clearly fallen off from what they were a few weeks ago without Jordan Travis.
Yeah, a couple things to consider here. Number 1, Florida State had to go to their 3rd-string quarterback in the ACC championship, and Brock Glenn was not ready. They won in spite of him with a championship-level defense. I do think that's worth mentioning. You do wonder if Tate Rodemaker, Florida State's backup, who started to play better in the second half against Florida, if he plays yesterday and they put up 27, 30 points, would that have been enough? Would that have been convincing enough to put them in over Bama, who just beat Georgia in the SEC championship? We'll never know because it didn't happen. I feel for Florida State. I want to get that out there. An unbeaten Power 5 champion has never been left out of the college football playoff. And sure, you could say, well, this will never happen again. We're going to a 12-team system. That doesn't make it feel right, though, right now. It just doesn't. I get both sides of the argument. I think right now the 4 teams that made it are going to give you the best and most entertaining product on the field. But at the same time, to your point, what was Florida State supposed to do? I mean, Jesse Palmer on the telecast last night is telling Mike Norvell
to run up the score
late to try and seem more convincing. He's just trying to manage a game with the third-string quarterback in the moment. It's hard to do that, man. So you let us know. Did the committee get it right? Type Y for yes and for no. I think for the best games possible they did, Tyler, but I can't say there isn't an argument to be pissed if you're Florida State fans, because there absolutely is.
Did they get the 4 best teams? Yes. Did they get the 4 most deserving? No. That's what this comes down to. The committee, I'll say to their credit, has been consistent the entire time in the last few months of we are looking for the best, not resume based. What do you guys think? Why for yes and for no?
And obviously it's always a combination of both, and I think the injury to Jordan Travis pretty clearly swayed the pendulum against Florida State. So let's take a look at these matchups a little bit here, Tyler. You got the Rose Bowl, which Michigan opted to take that game, which makes sense. You don't want to play Alabama down in New Orleans. So they're going to play in Pasadena, 5 o'clock Eastern. Rose Bowl wants to keep that afternoon time slot, which is when it's always been on New Year's Day. Wolverines undefeated, trying to slay that college football playoff dragon. They've lost to Georgia a couple of years ago. They got upset by TCU last year. Well, now they get a red-hot Alabama team. That doesn't make it that much easier, as Jalen Milroe is playing pretty good football for Nick Saban right now.
This is an incredibly tough draw for a 1 seed to have to be facing this Bama team. Milroe is playing so much better than what he did at the start of this season. And Michigan, they were able to weather the storm without Jim Harbaugh, and their defense looked fantastic down the stretch here. This is going to be a fantastic game.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch it. I think the early line is like Michigan minus 2.5 or something like that. It's tight. Over-under set at 46 for anyone keeping track at home. Sportsbooks are definitely raking in the bets right now. We'll take a look at Washington and Texas in a moment. That, of course, is a rematch from the Alamo Bowl game a year ago. But before we get there, let's talk about Prize Picks, today's sponsor. There's going to be a lot of Prize Picks, more or less type of projections you can get into with these college football playoff games and all these bowl games over the next month or so. Get started today, prizepicks.com/CLNS, our code CLNS. Get you a deposit match up to $100. It's daily fantasy made easy. They have stat projections, and you take the more or less on player entries from 2 to 6 players. If you do a 6-player entry, you can win up to 25 times your money if you hit on all 6 picks. If you do a 2-player entry, it's less bang for your buck, but easier to connect, obviously. Little NFL Sunday entry for you guys. Christian McCaffrey, half a rushing touchdown. I think he finds the end zone today. Give me more there. A.J. Brown, who's been red hot. Chris Godwin, good receiver. Only need 1 total touchdown rushing or receiving out of those 2. I think that hits. Give me more. I'm going to go less on Bailey Zappi passing yards. The Patriots are a mess offensively. $10 to win 50, so 5 times your money there. Again, you can win up to 25 times your money. Get started with Prize Picks today, prizepicks.com/CLNS. Use our code CLNS to get a deposit match up to $100. Let's take a look at the Sugar Bowl, Tyler. It's a rematch of the Alamo Bowl, like I mentioned. Texas and Washington, 2 high-flying offenses, but some pretty good defenses, too. I think both these teams are pretty complete.
Yeah, and I think the common theme with both these teams is they have found ways to win this year. Texas went through a lull where they got by teams like Kansas State. They were without Quinn Ewers for a while. Washington, on the other end, got by teams like Arizona State and USC and others. But here they are, finding a way to get to this championship game. 2 very good quarterbacks. I think this one's going to be a fantastic matchup here. Washington, watch out for their run game. That run game looks fantastic against Oregon.
They're balanced.
Texas did a great job of slowing down Ollie Gordon in the Big 12 championship. Will Washington be able to have an effective run game like they had in the Pac-12 title game?
Yeah, and the good news is if the run does get stuffed, if you're a Washington fan, you've got an NFL quarterback and 3 NFL receivers with Jalen Polk, obviously Rome Odunze. They've got Washington as well. Or Washington also has, I'm completely blanking on that 3rd receiver, Jalen McMillan, the other one as well. They got 3 big-time receivers. Texas, Xavier Worthy was on crutches in the second half of the Big 12 title game. We'll keep an eye on that. They got 4 weeks to get ready, both preparation-wise and health-wise. That would be a notable loss if he was unavailable, but he's been nicked up all year. I have a feeling he's going to be available. They've got A.D. Mitchell on the outside, and even though Jonathan Brooks went out with injury, Tyler, they've got a good crew of running backs back there. Blue's been running the ball well. They've got C.J. Baxter as well. Keelan Robinson's a good change of pace back. So both these offenses can really go, both in the run and the pass game. And they're not unreal defenses, but they're both more than adequate on that side of the football.
Yeah, and then the Xavier Worthy element. Is he going to be able to play or not? How does that change things for Texas in this matchup? That'll be something to monitor. The big storyline, obviously, is Florida State getting left out of this whole ordeal with an undefeated record, the first ever Power 5 team to go undefeated and miss the playoff. Did they get screwed? Type 1 for yes, type 2 for no. Harry, what say you?
I think they did get screwed, but I understand why they got screwed, if that makes sense. Like, look, if I'm a Florida State alum, I don't care what any of these talking heads, you wouldn't care what I would have to say, and I wouldn't blame you. Like, I think the matchups are better with Florida State out of it, but that doesn't mean they didn't get screwed. They absolutely got screwed. They're an unbeaten Power 5 champ. They beat LSU and Florida in the non-con. They got screwed because their quarterback got hip tackled and snapped his leg. That's why they're not in the playoffs. So it sucks for Florida State, man. It really does. I think the matchups are better without them, but they still got screwed. So I'm typing my 1 for yes. If you want more college football, NFL, and NBA coverage all year, we cover all 3 sports very, very closely. And if you're a college football fan, the next month or so, this is the time to be subscribed to Chat Sports. Help us out. Hit that sub button. It's 100% free. Recruiting information and updates. We got transfer portal updates. We'll have deeper dives into these playoff matchups as we move forward as well. We'll take a deep dive into Washington, Texas, and into Michigan, Alabama, so be on the lookout for that. Sub for more content. We would greatly appreciate it. Some final thoughts here, Tyler. So, again, and we nailed this on our live show. We thought Texas was going to be in and be number 3, and that was the case. The decision the committee had to go through was, are we going to leave out an unbeaten Power 5 champ for the first time ever, or are we going to leave out the SEC for the first time ever? Something that has never happened before was going to happen. They opted to keep the SEC in with Alabama and to exclude a Power 5 unbeaten champ in Florida State.
Yeah, that's the bed that they made, and they're going to have to sleep in it with that decision here. And you look at that Alabama team, and your one blemish is to a team that is in the playoff in that Texas team. And I'll say this. Florida State has every right to be pissed. No question about it. But it's not like that you got left out for an undeserving team in Alabama. This team, Alabama, looks like a complete football team on both sides of the football that just beat the number 1 team in the country, ended the nation's longest winning streak that was owned by Georgia here. Like, that's a worthy team. I mean, Alabama deserved to be there too. It's
not like Georgia, who lost their conference championship game, got in over Florida State.
Right.
That would have been criminal if that happened. That didn't happen. This is the ultimate life isn't fair moment.
Yes.
It really is. I mean, the committee had 5 very worthy teams. All 5. This is the first year all 5 Power 5 champions had a very strong argument. In the 10-year history of the 4-team playoff, first year it's ever happened. Usually there's like a 2-loss team or whatever.
We have a 4-team tournament, and you're telling me the Power 5 system didn't necessarily work for 4 teams?
Shocking.
Yeah, imagine that. It's tough nature, tough business, but at the end of the day, I think the committee made the right call. I hate it for Florida State, but Alabama is the better team. The number 1 job of the committee is to get the 4 best teams.
Yeah, and look, that's always subjective. We know that, but I tend to agree with you. These games are going to be better without Florida State, but that doesn't make it any less painful if you're a Florida State fan. It really doesn't. But I guess the silver lining is this is why you expand. You know, coming into this year, a lot of people didn't like the expansion idea. Well, we just had a year where it's so clearly if expansion was in play, it would be better
think
for
about
everyone.
Think about this as far as that expansion idea goes. In next year's situation, Florida State at 5 would then have to play a first-round game at home. And I think we could live with that. We could say, okay, sure, you didn't earn the first-round bye.
Prove it to us you're worthy of being here. Yeah.
And I could live with that.
Georgia would be in. Ohio State, that lost 1 game by 6 points, would be in. So let us know who you guys think wins the college football playoff this year. Michigan, Alabama in the Rose Bowl, Washington, Texas in the Sugar Bowl. Should be fun. Let us know who you guys think wins it all.